All right, in compliance with Chapter 551, Open Meetings of the Texas Government Code, I call to order a session of the Board of Trustees of the Austin Independent School District for Monday, October 26th at 5:36 p.m. President Rodriguez is not in attendance, so as Board Vice President, I will preside during this meeting. A quorum of the board, along with a limited number of our staff members, are physically present at AISD headquarters to conduct this meeting. In addition, we have a majority of our staff joining us by video. We are following necessary health protocols to ensure that the safety of those who are here in person, but please keep in mind we are continuing to comply with local health orders and CDC guidance. So we are not yet able to open our meetings to in-person attendance by our full staff and community. Today is also our first meeting at our board dais, which has plexiglass installed in between each trustee, similar to what many of our students and staff have been offered as an additional safety measure. We will be continuing to use the virtual platform until it is safe to do otherwise. This meeting is streaming live on AISD TV, Facebook Live, and Apple TV. It's also being broadcast on cable channel 22 through Spectrum, Grande, Google Fiber TV, and on channel 99 through AT&T Uverse. Closed captioning in English is available on these platforms for the hearing impaired. To our audience tuning in remotely, welcome and thank you for joining us. We will move to the approval of the agenda. Secretary Ellens, do you have a motion to approve the agenda?
I do. The board's legal counsel has recommended that she provide legal advice and clarification regarding one of our consent items. So I move we approve the agenda, adding a brief executive session immediately before item 8.1. So I move to approve the consent agenda with that amendment. I move to approve the agenda with that amendment.
Is there a second?
Second.
Having a motion by Secretary Ellens and a second by Trustee Letitia Anderson to approve the agenda, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. Motion passes by all those currently on the dais. Secretary Ellens, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and the pledge to the Texas flag? Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, one, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. Pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible. Next, we have 4 recognitions to present. The first recognition is National Bullying Prevention Month, a time to draw attention to childhood bullying and unite around the message that bullying should never be part of a childhood or campus experience. Dr. Elizalde?
Good evening. Thank you, Vice President Anderson, members of the board. National Bullying Prevention Month 2020. As stated, October is National Bullying Prevention Month. This national campaign to raise awareness of bullying, to change the dialogue, to recognize that bullying has devastating effects such as school avoidance, loss of self-esteem, increased anxiety, and depression. During this time, when many of our students are virtual, Austin ISD has adapted our responses to bullying to include bullying that is taking place in online settings. Remember the adage, the axe forgets what the tree remembers. Our children are the trees. We are all charged with protecting them to ensure safe places for them to grow and thrive.
Thank you. Any comments from trustees? If not, the second recognition is for Dyslexia Awareness Month, a time to raise awareness, share stories, and provide a spotlight on dyslexia and recognize the unique strengths of our dyslexia learners and how we can better address challenges in reading, writing, and spelling. Dr. Elizalde?
Thank you again. October is designated as Dyslexia Awareness Month to help raise awareness and educate people about the challenges and contributions of Texans affected by dyslexia. Dyslexia is a common lifelong condition that affects the way the brain processes written and spoken language. It is characterized by difficulties with accurate and/or fluent word recognition and by poor spelling and decoding abilities. As we raise awareness about dyslexia, we must also emphasize how important early diagnosis and access to assistance are for those affected by dyslexia. Austin Independent School District has a variety of structures in place to assist with early identification across all grades through the Department of Dyslexia and Literacy, including training, interventions, therapy and certified academic language therapists, professional development, and dyslexia and literacy coaches. I encourage everyone in Austin ISD to expand their knowledge of dyslexia and recognize the invaluable support provided by parents, teachers, and other professionals to those affected by dyslexia.
Thank you. Any comments from trustees? Secretary Ellens?
Thank you. And thank you for recognizing this very specific educational area of work of the district. It is a challenge for at least 20% of our student learners. 60% of our special ed students are challenged with reading struggles. So this work that we are doing is in the district is specifically targeted at large numbers of our students. And so I'm very grateful the district has taken this on. I will say it has been my mission. This is my equity space where I have worked for the past 8 years, and I am very hopeful that it will continue. Once I'm gone, I am sure the data will drive that work as much as anything. And I appreciate, Dr. Elizalde, your willingness to learn and to keep moving us forward in this work. It's so important, and it really is education space, where so many of our other items reach beyond. This is very focused, very structured work. And I do know we still have a long way to go to implement it with fidelity at every one of our campuses, but I have great faith that that's the direction we're going. So thank you very much.
Thank you. The third recognition is for National Principals Month, a time to recognize campus principals for their invaluable contribution to their schools and students. Dr. Elizalde?
Yes, it is National Principals Month to recognize our principals, who are, after all, our superheroes here in the district. It is my pleasure to recognize our Chief of Schools, Dr. Anthony Mays. He will provide a few remarks prior to us playing a real short video. Dr. Mays?
Good evening, everyone. And so it is October, so it is National Principals Month. And we seek to honor our principals for their significant impact on our nation's students' success and well-being. Given the numerous challenges with COVID-19, we know that job is significantly harder right now. And so we consider our school leaders heroes. And so Austin ISD has 129 principals who serve as instructional leaders, community builders, facility managers, case managers, caretakers for the entire system, students and staff and families, working towards preparing every student for college, career, and life. And so today we want to salute our principals. We want to salute them every day, but today especially we want to make sure that we recognize their dedication and commitment to the families and students of Austin ISD. And so with that being said, we have prepared a brief presentation because we wanted to capture some of the acknowledgements and time that we wanted to put in for those principals.
There is something incredible about our principals in Austin ISD. They are heroes among us. They may not wear capes, but their powers go beyond what anyone can imagine. Take a moment to watch a principal in action. A principal knows when a child has had a great day and when they don't seem like themselves. A principal helps cover lunch duty, passing periods, and recess. A principal jumps in as safety monitors for traffic, mornings and evenings. A principal offers tech support and emotional support. A principal has the power to control the volume in a classroom or an auditorium without saying a word. A principal has a pulse on the community and never hesitates to step up and save the day. Principals are propelled by a drive for good and triumph against all odds. They bring students, teachers, staff, and families together and lead a community to persevere through the tough times and celebrate the wins.
Mr. Alonso is an amazing principal, and especially now during the pandemic, he's been very available for us. It was like a playbook. He was always like, okay, this is our next move, and we need to work together as a team to make sure that we're going to get through whatever situation that we're going to get through.
Something I appreciate about Mr. Barrett is that he is trying to make Becker a safer place right now in this pandemic. Something that makes a good principal is caring about your students and their safety. Mr. Barrett is my principal and I think he's awesome.
Thank you, principals, for the vision, passion, and courage you bring every day. Thank you for being our superheroes.
Thank you again to our superintendent and our board for helping us to honor our principals on today.
Thank you. Trustee Letitia Anderson?
So I just want to say to our principals, I know that I can't even begin to understand the challenges that you face trying to navigate this crazy pandemic and ensuring student and staff safety, but thank you. I mean, I know that really doesn't cover everything, but thank you from the bottom of my heart. Every day you get up and you do this, and you do it for your love and passion for students and staff. So thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Trustee Antike?
Would it be okay if we stood up and gave them a round of applause, like a standing ovation, because they deserve it? We couldn't do it without you.
Okay. The last recognition is for our partners at the City of Austin and at the many local Austin restaurants with their help in limiting food insecurity for our Austin ISD families. Dr. Elizalde?
Thank you again. It is commonly said that it takes a village to raise a child. In Austin, we are so fortunate to have the entire community rally to support our schools all the time, but especially during this pandemic. Please welcome Ms. Michelle Wallace, our Executive Director of the Office of Innovation and Development, who is joining us to offer our official recognition of our key partners who helped support caregiver meal service.
Thank you, Dr. Elizalde. Good evening, trustees. I am here tonight to ask for recognition of the City of Austin for its support of the Caregiver Meal Program and our restaurant vendors that are part of that program. Beginning in early May, the City of Austin supported the expansion of AISD's meal service so that caregivers receive healthy meals prepared by local restaurants alongside student meals. These funds were awarded to the Austin Ed Fund's AISD Crisis Support Fund and have been supplemented by generous community donations. As of October 22nd, over 602,000 meals have been provided to caregivers. I want to recognize Ryan Sengel from our Department of Food Services, who's led this effort and gone above and beyond to serve AISD families. And of course, the entire food services team who continues their extraordinary efforts to serve our community. We are grateful to the following partners, many of whom are tuning in tonight. I'd like to recognize a few people by name before we read the recognition statement. With the City of Austin, of course, our Mayor, Steve Adler, Mayor Pro Tem Delia Garza, Council members Natasha Harper Madison, Pio Renteria, Greg Kazar, Ann Kitchen, Jimmy Flanagan, Leslie Poole, Paige Ellis, Allison Alter, and Kathy Tovo. Special thanks to the Office of Councilmember Kathy Tovo, who has supported this program and provided an additional allocation to support it. Thank you, Councilmember Tobo, and especially Ashley Richardson. To the staff at Austin Public Health, thank you, especially Stephanie Hayden, Adrian Stirrup, Michelle Friedman, and Laura LaFuente, and Edwin Marty with the city's Office of Sustainability. And we know there are countless city staff not recognized individually here who have worked behind the scenes to make this happen. Thank you. We also appreciate the service of the vendors working to provide caregiver meals, providing quality, delicious food from some of our favorite restaurants in Austin and the best chefs in Austin. Good Work Austin is a collaborative that includes Loco de Oro, Contigo, and Colleen's Kitchen, Adam Orman and Fiore Tedesco, Joe Carr with Easy Tiger, and Kevin Fink with Henbit. And we know each of you have teams of employees who help prepare and deliver the meals. Please pass along our gratitude. Trustees, it's my pleasure to request recognition for the City of Austin and our caregiver meal service restaurant vendors. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Tyke, do you have a statement to read?
I do, and it's my pleasure to do so. On behalf of the Austin ISD Board of Trustees, it is my honor to recognize the support of the City of Austin for its support of the Caregiver Meal Program and the Caregiver Meal Service restaurant vendors. We are grateful for the support of City Council members and staff from City of Austin departments, including Austin Public Health and the Office of Sustainability. We appreciate the dedication of local restaurants, Easy Tiger, Good Work Austin, and Henbit for their support and commitment to Austin ISD families. In early May, the City of Austin passed a resolution to direct approximately $1.4 million to the Austin Ed Fund and the AISD Crisis Support Fund to partner with local restaurants to prepare and distribute meals to caregivers alongside student meals. Councilmember Kathy Tovo championed the program and provided an additional $150,650 donation to ensure any delays to the finalization and execution of the agreement would not impede AISD's ability to begin providing meals to caregivers. In August and September, additional funds were allocated, and on October 15th, City Council extended support again, bringing the total contribution from the City of Austin for caregiver meals to nearly $4.2 million. From May 19 through October 16, our restaurant partners, Easy Tiger, Good Works Austin, a collaborative that includes Loco de Oro, Colleen's Kitchen, and Contigo, and Henbit, have provided over 580,000 meals for caregivers. Through this partnership, we have been able to not only help keep our families fed, but also support local businesses and keep many restaurant workers employed. These types of partnerships are to be commended. It is with great pride that the Board of Trustees of the Austin Independent School District recognizes and sincerely thanks the supporters of the AISD Caregiver Meal Service Program for their partnership in support of Austin ISD and its families.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the President's Report. First, we will start with the announcement of 2020 Board Continuing Education Credits. Texas law requires that a school board publicly share the completion and total number of continuing education requirements for trustees at the meeting before a trustee election. In addition to required trainings on understanding student data and outcomes, cybersecurity, human trafficking, team building, and updates to the Texas Education Code, trustees are required to take an additional 10 hours of continuing education focused on school boards and district governance. Due to COVID, the Texas Education Agency actually waived the requirements for training until January 31st, 2021, and waived the requirement to report on continuing education for this year. While no longer required, Austin ISD and the Board of Trustees wish to still highlight the multiple hours of training each member has completed. I would now like to read the required public disclosure into our minutes. Annually, each board president or the presiding officer is required by law to announce the names of each board member who has completed the requiring continuing education credits, who has exceeded the required hours of continuing education credits, and who is deficient in the required continuing education credits. This includes board orientation, Texas Education Code training, Texas Open Meetings training, team building, legislative update training, and other types of continuing education. In 2020, Cindy Anderson, Letitia Anderson, Kristen Ashe, Amber Ellens, Jamie Mathias, Geronimo Rodriguez, Arthi Singh, Ann Tyke, and Yasmin Wagner all exceeded the required minimum number of Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, and Tier 4 continuing education hours. Cindy Anderson had 24.5 hours, Letitia Anderson 31 hours, Kristen Ashe 29 hours, Amber Ellens 27.5 hours, Jamie Mathias 27 hours, Geronimo Rodriguez 27 hours, Arthi Singh 39.5 hours, Ann Tyke 27.5 hours, and Yasmin Wagner 13 hours. Congratulations to my colleagues on their commitment to continuous learning. Next, as part of the President's report, I would like to provide an update for the district's scorecard and our work in ensuring we are practicing strategic governance for Austin ISD. This work began back during the 2018-2019 school year as this team developed board priorities and a new framework for strategic planning. This work led to our mission, vision, and values being approved in June. We are now nearing the end of this most recent cycle and will finalize a scorecard on November 16th that identifies key performance measures across the organization and focuses improvement efforts on the highest priorities. The next discussion on a draft instrument will occur at our November 2nd board information session, followed by another board retreat if needed on November 9th. Please be sure to tune in to these upcoming meetings as we discuss student and district outcomes and our new scorecard. Next on our agenda is under trustee accolades and committee reports. This item is for trustees to lift up some of the good work of teachers, students, and schools in the district. In addition, we will ask our board committee chairs and our designees on external groups to provide a brief update on any meetings or discussions of the committee. We will start with our accolades. Trustees, is there anything you would like to share? Trustee Tyke?
On October 22nd, it was my pleasure to be present at Burnett Middle School to participate in the awarding of $10,000 in net spend cards to teachers at Burnett Middle School. This was brought about through the work of the Austin FC, the city's new professional soccer club, and its commitment to leverage their community relationships and collaborate on a number of community-focused programs to support the Austin and Central Texas region, including a community uplift project. So this happened at Burnett Middle School, and I was able to witness the handing over of the check. And on October 22nd, NetSpend and Austin FC donated $10,000 in NetSpend cards for the purchase of supplies by school staff. The surprise gifts, along with the provided lunch, were a well-received recognition of the work Burnett teachers are doing to support their students. We look forward to the continuation of the partnership with the Austin FC and our students at Burnett Middle School. Go Sailors.
Thank you. Trustee Ashe and then Trustee Letitia Anderson.
Yes, thank you. I was wanting to share a wonderful student accolade. A young man, Leo DeSantis, a visually impaired fifth grader at Doss Elementary, has competed in the final round of the National Braille Challenge for the second time. The Braille Challenge is the only academic competition of its kind for blind and visually impaired students. Students throughout the United States and Canada compete in preliminary Braille challenge events, which are held in January through March each year. The 10 contestants with the highest scores in each age group are then invited to participate in the national finals, which is typically a 2-day event in Los Angeles. This year, due to COVID, the event was held virtually and included several informative webinars, social events, and a wonderful awards ceremony. Congratulations, Leo, for this incredible accomplishment for the second year in a row.
Thank you. Trustee Letitia Anderson, followed by Trustee Ellens.
Barbara Jordan teacher Jessica Foster was recently on the news sharing her public art murals project that brought together professional artists and students to beautify the walls of Barbara Jordan with 4 new murals. This was a great opportunity for the kids to take part in a large-scale community arts project with the focus on encouraging students to explore their artistic talents. Ms. Foster shared, it's vital. I don't think there is even a way to quantify how important art is to students. I think that it's an outlet, and especially right now with everything that's going on in the world. Be sure to drive past the school to view the 4 new pieces of art. It's awesome. Also, I want to applaud Maplewood PE teacher Rebecca Lambden Abrams, who was named 2020 Teacher of the Year by the Texas Association for Health, Physical Education, Recreation, and Dance. Congratulations, Ms. Lambden Abram.
So it's my turn, and I would love to give a shout out to the Austin High debate team under the leadership of Coach Lauren Cooney. The 20-member team has been competing in virtual competitions since August, even hosting a tournament this past weekend, which included more than 20 teams from across the United States and China. I wanted to give a specific shout out to the seniors James Hartline and Haley Plumley, who have already qualified for the state tournament next summer. James took first place varsity Lincoln Douglas at the Westlake tournament the first weekend of October. Haley, meanwhile, received third place in the varsity Lincoln Douglas event and first place overall speaker. So thank you and congratulations to the Austin High Maroon debaters. You've done us proud. Keep it up.
Thank you. Trustee Singh and then Trustee Wagner.
So I get to talk about food. Very excited about that. So October 12th through 16th was National School Lunch Week. So I just wanted to share a few facts about our school lunch program and our awesome food service team. First of all, you may not know how big it is. We have 558 kitchen staff and 53 central and warehouse staff, so that's 611 total food service staff. Meals are free for all of our students through the end of the school year, and families are asked to complete income verification forms in lieu of meal benefit applications to ensure schools receive funding reflective of the community needs. We are sending home after-school meals at 70-plus campuses, and we're sending home weekend meals at all of our campuses. Food service staff were some of the first in the city to stand up for the community when the pandemic began in Austin, and we're so grateful for that. From March 13th through September 8th, we served about 1.5 million meals to students and caregivers. From the first day of school through the phase in face-to-face instruction, September 8th through now, basically, we've served about almost 800,000 meals to students and caregivers. So, and of course, we've done this with some of our community partners, as you heard before. And let's see here. We give out about 20,000 caregiver meals per week, and we are the first district in Texas to participate in the Good Food Purchasing Program, which works to create a transparent and equitable food system built on 5 core values, which are local economies, health, valued workforce, animal welfare, and environmental sustainability. So I just want to really give a big thank you to all of our food service workers for continuing to ensure access to nutritious, quality meals all year long, and they're delicious too. So thank you.
Trustee Tuck, did you want to add something on that? And then it's Trustee Wagner.
No, I wanted to do a separate announcement, so I'll wait for Trustee Wagner.
Okay.
All right, well, I am excited to highlight a program that is an incredibly special and also unique program for Austin ISD, and that Austin ISD was one of the earliest adopters of social and emotional learning programs in the country. And so I'm excited to announce new work that's happening in the 2021 school year. And apologies while I read because I don't want to miss anything. So I'm proud to announce that 83 campuses are participating in the 2021 Seed Model Campus Cohort Program. The purpose of the Seed Model Campus Cohort is to support campuses throughout Austin ISD in their journey of goal-oriented, intentional, campus-wide SEL integration into school culture and systems. In order to engage in the process, all participants are asked to submit a proposal which includes a SMARTY goal around one of 4 SEL critical practice areas identified by the CASTLE roadmap. Austin's ISD Seed Model Campus Cohort Program has grown from 19 campuses who engaged in the process during the inaugural 2017-18 school year to over 80 campuses this year. So congratulations to each and every school who's participating. I also wanted to highlight an exciting event that we had this past week, which was the virtual grand opening of Bear Creek Elementary School. Bear Creek is the first completely new, not new building, but completely new, didn't exist before the 2017 bond school. And it is located in my district, in District 7 in Southwest Austin. Not only is it a stunning new facility, but it also provided some desperately needed relief with many of our schools there, which were over capacity nearby. And I'm really excited about the work, not only of the campus administration, who has taken on the challenge of opening a new school during a pandemic, which is about every challenge I think you can throw it as a principal, but also to the community for their support and for gathering and rallying around a successful start to the school year in a brand new school with a brand new school community. So thank you.
Trustee Tyke and then Trustee Letitia Anderson.
Yes, I'd like to highlight and offer some kudos to our first virtual Hispanic Heritage Talent Show, which I had the pleasure of viewing on October the 15th. And many students from around our campuses participated. I'd like to give a shout out to the Navarro Early College High School students whose art was featured, and their teacher, Isabunto Serafis. So I really appreciated seeing all of the wonderful talent all the way from our pre-K3 all the way up through our high school students as they celebrated Hispanic Heritage Month. I just wanted to give a shout out for that.
And as Trustee Wagner mentioned SEL, it just made me think about giving my spiel. As we navigate these crazy times, please keep in mind, we do have mental health centers on our campuses. So please take advantage of that. If you need any information, you can find it on our website on the homepage. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got an accolade as well. This is National School Bus Safety Week, and AISD's Transportation Employee Appreciation Week was October 19th through the 23rd. This year's theme was Red Light Means Stop, which promoted the importance of keeping students safe by stopping when a bus has its red boarding lights flashing and a stop arm extended. Cookies and other refreshments were provided at the bus terminals to celebrate our 350 bus drivers and 270 other transportation staff members. Our transportation staff has been on the front line since March 13th when we closed schools. They've helped deliver food, repair and deliver Chromebooks, and provide Wi-Fi buses for students. Thank you so much to all of our bus drivers and transportation workers. President Rodriguez will be joining us later, and he has an accolade that he would like to share, but I will not steal his thunder and allow him to do that when he arrives. We will now move on to our committee and group reports. The board's audit committee did not meet this past month, so they have no report. Trustee Ashe, do you have a report for the policy committee?
Yes, thank you. I do. The policy committee met on October the 15th. We discussed several policies, including FNG local, which we will continue to discuss at our next meeting, dealing with the some of our grievances processes. With FDB local, we will also be continuing to explore the transfer policy, as Dr. Elzalde will be bringing us some recommendations from her administration. We discussed DBD local, and the committee felt very comfortable for us to be bringing that forward to the rest of the Board of Trustees for a vote coming soon. AE local, which dealt with our educational philosophy, and we will be looking to update that to match our strategic plan, as well as our transfer policy. We also discussed that and are continuing those discussions at our next meeting. And future other policies that we will be discussing are EIE local and EIC local.
Thank you. Trustee Singh, do you have a report for the legislative committee?
I do. So the legislative committee is still working on revising the legislative priorities for the district, and I believe we're going to vote on them next month, right? Okay, so we're looking forward to that, and I'm just going to make another plug. Please vote. Early voting ends on Friday, this Friday at 7 p.m., and Election Day is next Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Singh, do you also have a report for Austin Partners in Education?
No, we did not meet since the last meeting.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Ellens, do you have a report for the Governance Committee?
I do. The board's governance committee met virtually October 8th, 2020, with the board officers, Dr. Elizalde, Dr. Reach, Tony Cordova, and the board's legal counsel, Christine Badillo, in attendance. The committee drafted plans and agendas for the October meetings and the November information session and board retreat. Members continued working through various communication and governance issues for the team of 10 work, including managing the flow of information to and from the community to the superintendent and board members. The superintendent will provide solutions and details as they are created and available. The administration is continuing to develop processes to ensure district and board committees are operating as intended and as legally required if necessary. District leaders are also exploring the grievance processes for options to complete them more efficiently and effectively. The board officers, with assistance from the administration, are leading efforts for the trustees to fill our open seat on the Travis County Appraisal District and to designate co-chairs for the School Health Advisory Committee. The committee is also working to schedule a virtual luncheon with local legislators to educate them on the district's 2021 legislative agenda. The next meeting of the committee has not yet been scheduled. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I would like to provide a committee update for President Rodriguez from the Austin Education Fund. First, a thank you to trustees and community members who attended the Austin Ed Fund Inspire the Future event on the 29th of September. We welcomed Dr. Elizalde and celebrated the impact of the AISD Crisis Support Fund in supporting the needs of AISD students, staff, and families during the pandemic. Thanks to our sponsors and donors, over $210,000 has been raised to date. These funds will support Ed Fund programs, including teacher grants. If you did not get a chance to see the Inspire the Future program, it's not too late. You can view the program or make a donation at www.austinedfund.org. The Ed Fund's AISD Crisis Support Fund has raised over $6 million to date. As you heard earlier tonight, the City of Austin has contributed over $4 million to support the Caregiver Meals Program. Special thanks to more than 700 generous donors to the Crisis Support Fund. The Austin Ed Fund is continuing to support needs during the pandemic. Teacher projects supported by the Ed Fund Special Grant Program are underway. Staff recently attended a public walkthrough of the 4 beautiful new murals at Barbara Jordan Elementary School. The event included the distribution of art supplies for families and was led by art teacher Jessica Foster. The Ed Fund recently announced 73 grant awards to teachers and campuses across Austin ISD, totaling $382,000 from the special grant program created in response to COVID and racial injustice. Proposals ranged from remote learning needs to innovative teaching strategies to cultural proficiency and inclusiveness professional learning opportunities. The need is great. Teachers submitted proposals requesting over $871,000. Our next item on the agenda is the superintendent's report and information on our Open for Learning plan. Dr. Elizalde.
Thank you again. And I know we've communicated quite a bit with regard to our Open for Learning, but we also know during this period of time, over-communication is really a positive thing. So you should have both, there should exist a hard copy of a PowerPoint presentation at your spot, and there we go. So we will be going through this. Next slide, please. So as previously stated, we have worked as a team, and we have not just campus staff, but we also have our central staff reporting. November 2nd will be the first day that we will have to ensure that we're offering, I want to repeat that we have offering for all students to have on-campus instruction every day if they so desired. I will reference this a little bit later with regard to some of the concerns that I've heard that I think we have a really good plan, as you will see shortly. We have asked for our parents once again to provide us information regarding their desires and their needs. We have that open until this Wednesday, October 28th. That will allow us significant and enough time for us to evaluate the number of students so that we can ensure that we're continuing to follow our safety and protocols. And then as a reminder, November 3rd is Election Day, and more importantly for all of our students, it's a student holiday. It is a professional development day for our employees. However, that day has been designated a remote work day for everyone, including central staff. So that would be a day when all our campus and staff that would typically be performing or providing professional development, they will be able to do that from home. Our next slide, to allow for some clarity, I wanted to reaffirm the information regarding what the requirements are. So taken directly from the Texas Education Agency and in compliance with such, there is a link that specifically has frequently asked questions, also known as FAQs. I believe we've also provided you hard copies of this particular language directly from the Texas Education Agency website, and it provides, I think, quite a bit of clarity with regard to the instructional model. I believe, do we have a connection to the link here? And as we're getting to the link, I wanted to be able to just show us that the link itself, so you go to the web page and then you go to the section, that's the TEA COVID web page, and then you can click on the guidance and information. And then you can see these are frequently asked questions. They're updated sometimes daily, but if you look on page 4, which I know is small to see on the screen, which is why we provided you a hard copy, I would like to just emphasize that if you go to page 4, and we've highlighted in yellow the section regarding on-campus instruction, and if you will allow me, because there's been so much confusion, if you will please indulge me and allow me to read it aloud. When schools are open and operating normally, students are scheduled to attend school on campus each day. Student schedules determine whether they will generate full or half-day funding, because that's referring to pre-K3 students. It could also be utilizing students that may be coming to school half a day and working half a day. And students generate funding when attendance is recorded for students who are physically present at school at a locally selected snapshot time. Traditional on-campus instruction will continue to be funded as it was before COVID-19, before the pandemic. There are some exceptions. However, in bold, even though it's not highlighted, I would like to draw your attention to the words on-campus instruction must be offered for all grades served by the campus every day for every student. For parents who wish, you can see the exceptions, and that would be if we were part of a virtual campus, which we are not. If it was prohibited by an entity that would have the authority to, for instance, close the schools, if the governor closed the schools, well, then this would also not apply because he would have closed our schools. Or provided that we have to close a campus in the event that we would have a cluster of COVID cases and we might close the school, well, then we would not have to have students because that's exactly the reason for safety purposes. We wouldn't have the campus open. On page 5, this is the part that talks about that additional 4-week waiver that I think was also confusing. So the first 4 weeks could have occurred without meeting this instructional requirement. And then it said with the option of extending 4 additional weeks, which the board approved the 4 additional weeks, and we took advantage of those 4 additional weeks. And you will see that it says to provide time to during this transition period, LEAs can, if they choose to do so, locally limit access to on-campus instruction to facilitate a safe, effective return to on-campus instruction for students, teachers, and staff. So that's exactly what we did by offering the 25%, 50% on campus, and so on. If you will turn to page 6, You will also see information regarding what counts as on-campus instruction. So again, if you will indulge me, students who are on campus must, for at least part of the day, receive in-person instruction or instructional support from a teacher or instructional aide assigned to the student's classroom who has the capacity and expertise to provide academic support and feedback specific to the student's grade level and content area. An example that would not count for on-campus instruction would be a third grade student of a high school teacher who remains with a high school teacher throughout the day. The teacher is providing high school instruction, so the third grader is not receiving on-campus instruction. An example that would count for on-campus instruction would be the same third grader present in the classroom with his or her third grade teacher. On page 7, there's one more reference to this regarding, does this count as on-campus attendance? In order to count as on-campus attendance, students must receive instructional support from staff who have the capacity and expertise to provide academic support specific to the student's grade level and content area. Some of the instruction may still be remotely delivered to on-campus students, but those students must also receive instructional support on campus for it to be considered on-campus attendance. The last part, if students are on campus and engaging in remote instruction with no on-campus instructional support specific to their grade level and content areas, then that would be considered remote instruction, the same as it would be if they were doing that at home, and would need to follow all remote instruction requirements, including marking the students as remote attendance present or remote present for funding purposes. So we would be able to count them present, but we cannot say that we're meeting the needs of funding because those students then are not receiving on-campus instruction, they're receiving remote instruction. So there is no differentiation between a student who's receiving 100% remote instruction in their home versus a student who's receiving 100% remote instruction in the school building. With that, I also wanted to identify the AAP, or the American Academy of Pediatrics, and also taken from their guidance. Physical distance between desks should follow current health guidelines. In the absence of specific guidance, desks should be placed at least 3 feet apart and ideally 6 feet apart. If desks are spaced less than 6 feet, face coverings should be strongly encouraged. I wanted to highlight this because we don't strongly encourage the mask, we require the mask to be utilized. In addition, in some of our classrooms, if there does happen to be more students in a particular grade level, plexiglass, similar to what we have right here, can be utilized to create a layering of protection. So a mask plus the barrier, if it is within 3 feet, is still a safety protocol that is observed as a good practice. With regard to actually who is coming to our schools, the next slide, when we do a comparison, you can see that we started off with fewer students attending, as we would have expected. And if you go all the way to, for instance, Thursday of last week, October 22nd, at the elementary, you can see that district-wide, we had 36% membership. When I say membership, of those that were actually physically reporting to on-campus instruction. Middle school was 12%, and high schools was 4%. I want to reiterate that high schools, actually you double that number because it is the only place where we've cut the number of students attending in half. Some students come, all the students that are physically coming only come 2 days out of the week, either Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday. With regard to our staff, our next slide talks again about the number of accommodations that we have granted. All of these accommodations expire December 31st of 2020. We will be continuing to support all of these accommodations, albeit it has placed some campuses in a hardship. We have indicated we would keep them through December of 2020, so we will find a way to ensure that we will be continuing to recognize and keep our word on the accommodation requests, as was even stated last week with our teacher roundtable or focus group. That was a question that they brought to me. We provided the response in writing, and I believe I shared that with you as well. For the spring of 2021, recognizing that there is great improvement that we can have for accommodation requests, both in timeliness and the transparency of what is actually approved, we will be establishing a benefits review committee so that there will be a committee that can keep track and actually prioritize the requests that are coming in for the accommodations. What we did recognize is there were some that were far more critical than others, but they were all kind of given the same prioritization. And now at this time, it makes it very challenging for someone who may be coming with a request, because we now are looking at every campus and whether that's a hardship on that school or not. We will also meet with Austin Public Health, and they will help us so that it's not us deciding the priorities. We will have the experts that will help us develop which are the areas that are considered the most at risk for our employees. I mentioned the plexiglass. Those have been ordered. We've started with a third of the campuses that had more, let's say that had a larger percentage of students, which currently is a few elementary schools, but we will ultimately be providing that to all of our campuses. In comparison, I also wanted to look at the number of positive cases, COVID-19, to a surrounding school district that is not quite as large, but at least is a similar size. So I think you can see that during the week of October 19th through the 25th, you can see our positive cases in comparison to Round Rock, whether we're looking at students and/or employees, and then cumulative exposures as well. So the top are numbers of the week, and the bottom is as of September 8th using the cumulative numbers. If we go to the next slide, I think this is one of our areas of, well, which group of students has the highest propensity to be attending our schools and wanting on-campus instruction. So if you look at our campuses, we just selected some of the campuses that have the largest percentage of economically disadvantaged students. And so you can see then that those range from Oak Springs has 28% of their enrollment reporting on campus. You have Norman Sims with 36%, and you have Allison at 42% reporting on campus. On the other end of the spectrum, campuses that have fewer economically disadvantaged students, you see some similar patterns. You've got some campuses at 16%, like Kuiper, and then Clayton with 28%. We go to slide 9, continuing that process. Those schools that had some of the highest percentage of enrollment, you can see there's Matthews at 51%, Dawson 43%, Allison and Andrews at 42% and 40% respectively. Then you also see some with lower, much lower attendance for on-campus instruction. You see Boone, Ridgetop, and Barton Hills. Those would be our elementary campuses on slide 10. You can see our middle schools, and again, you have a range. While the average for our middle schools was much lower than 20%, you can see that Sadler Means actually did have 20% of the students that are reporting on campus. And then you have some that have very few, 2% or 3%. At our high schools, the range, again, you can even see in many instances, I think we can draw some conclusions that it's based on the type of environment at the school and what they're working towards, because you can see that Garza and International both have, Garza has 94% of their enrollment coming to on-campus instruction. Yet we also have some other campuses that had very few students that were reporting to on-campus instruction. So lastly, I think just summarizing that we know in our priorities and the board's strategic framework, this is always about equity and excellence for our students and providing that environment. The safety and well-being of all our students and all of our staff is a priority for Austin ISD, as I know it is a priority for every board member sitting here at the dais. The goal is to collaboratively ensure that all students and employees feel safe and secure to effectively navigate the complexities of a new normal, whatever that is. Now, more than ever, the need for everyone to work together is critical. It is critical in serving our students through this challenging time. We know that there has been some misleading information that we were planning to revoke these accommodations. And as I provided for you the information that had even been shared prior to that coming to my attention, we had no intention of revoking the accommodations. We know that that would create a hardship on our employees, and they expected in faith that we would continue with those throughout the rest of this particular calendar year. Rest assured, we're committed to honoring all of these accommodations as stated. In addition to that, there have been some questions about plans at the school. Dr. Mays, our Chief Schools Officer, has had meetings and continues to have meetings with principals and principal supervisors to provide the direction with how to structure your day, how to structure the week, including the use of outdoor classroom space, so that there is adherence to the TEA guidelines and requirements, and yet also ensure that we provide teachers time to engage in one-on-one student support, progress monitoring, professional learning communities work, and always in a healthy and safe environment. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we are working to be in compliance with the Texas Education Agency's funding requirements. Additionally, through the collaboration of our operations team with school leadership and campus principals is how we came about with the layering processes of plexiglass and shields, in addition to other measures that will make our employees feel better. We are committed to providing clear and consistent information and communicating it out every time we get an opportunity. Every student and every employee is precious and essential. Working together and following our safety protocols, we will get through this crisis. Thank you, trustees.
Thank you, Dr. Elizalde. Trustees, are there any questions? Trustee Tyke?
So I've heard from many constituent teachers the concern about trying to deliver instruction as we currently have it, and I was hoping that you could perhaps discuss some of the thinking that's been going on with you and Dr. Mays and Ms. Casas about how we could move away from trying to basically split our brains and do on-campus instruction and then also have to provide remote learning too. So as a former teacher, I would find that very daunting to monitor students in the classroom who are on devices, try to prepare lessons to go for virtual teaching and that kind of thing, and then also offer instruction in person. So could you give us some of the thinking that's going on with you and your executive staff about how we can possibly move out of that model?
Sure. So it is going to be very challenging to move out of that model, and it's going to depend on the percentage of students that are reporting on campus, as well as the percentage of teachers that are already working in an accommodated setting. So we won't be able to provide, this is the way to do it at every school, because everything is so contextualized based on that campus. However, there are a few things we have recommended and are working with individual campuses to see if we can provide some guidance. It's most important that teachers be a part of that planning process at the campus level. However, what we have seen is, and there have been some campuses that have been able to, depending on the number of students that reported for on campus, find a way to have those students, if that teacher then is, let's say there's a first grade classroom and I have 5 students reporting from my class, and there's a teacher who's on an accommodations and 11 of his or her students are physically reporting. So rather than having both teachers have to deal with students, albeit the accommodations teacher doesn't have students in front of them per se because they're using a virtual instructional delivery model, what can happen is those 11 students, especially if it's first grade and first grade of the same program, like let's say general education students, then you could have a classroom of say 14 students, and that teacher could then say, these will be mine, and the students that were remote for that particular teacher can go to the other teacher with the students that remained. In areas where there has been teaming done, it actually has worked out fine because let's say, Trustee Tyke, you and I were team teachers in 3rd grade. Well, then our kids would have already known us because we were already teaming together. So those have been done in some places. Others, it hasn't been done yet. It's an opportunity, so we're working with those campuses. The challenge comes in when a grading period ends up, parents, by TEA guidelines, can choose to come to on-campus instruction. So then we could have a switch, or vice versa. Students from on campus can choose to go home. And that we allow to happen at any time. Coming back onto campus has to be with one time during a grading period because it can affect our social distancing and how we're managing numbers of students. And so the challenge is when we have, let's say, the example I gave, but this classroom is bilingual, that is the teacher that's on accommodations, and the teacher that remains is gen ed. If I'm not bilingually certified, then I cannot provide services to that student. And so being able to combine them is not something that's readily available. So what we are also thinking, and we have done, is some teachers have volunteered from the Roundtable group to have their classrooms and their ideas in video clips shown to other teachers so that other teachers can learn from what other teachers are doing that's working. Also, our teachers, well, I think all teachers, but our teachers in particular always want to strive for perfection and excellence because that's just who they are. And so I think we also need to help them understand that it's okay to have the students that are on remote only utilizing the minimum amount of minutes required for the virtual instruction and not feel like they need to be with them the entire day. And in fact, we know that that may be too much screen time. But helping them with how to create those, and then that the lesson plan should not be different. We don't want them to have to do one set of lesson plans and a different set of lesson plans, but rather how can we help you with those? All of those are both training sessions along with teachers giving us their best practices, not something we're taking out of a book, but something that comes from our own teachers will begin to be part of a series that we will generate for our teachers. Other than that, what we will continue to do is working through the principal supervisors, getting with our principals to provide what works best at this campus and then what works best at this campus.
And I appreciate that. And what I'm hearing is that campuses are being given some flexibility. Principals are being given flexibility. Teachers are doing what teachers do, which is make accommodations for the work that they have to do and work and support each other to help each other out and combine and recombine and that kind of thing. So I appreciate knowing that that flexibility is being allowed to our teachers on campuses and that our principals are facilitating that. So I appreciate that. Thank you. That gives me a little bit of hope.
Trustee Ashe?
Superintendent Elizalde, I was just wondering, when we were speaking earlier, one of the things that was in here, and it is a question I'm asked a lot, What constitutes a cluster of cases? So how will parents know if their campus has a cluster?
So we would actually notify them utilizing that language. It is a defined word based on, and I don't know if I even have Alexandra Copeland available right this minute or not. Nonetheless, it is a very specific term indicating that, for instance, we do think maybe there's been some internal transmission at a particular school. That type of internal transmission would require us to, in all likelihood, close a school. So you've heard of a couple of schools that were closed in some areas, and that had to do with the number of students or adults in an area that they felt this didn't come from necessarily outside. It might have come from outside, but then there was also internal transmission. So whenever we suspect that that's happening, that it's a possibility, then we would absolutely communicate, and that school would be shut down. There would be a general, a very specific cleaning done to emphasize that, you know, we're going to make sure that it's all taken care of. And so it's, we haven't, you know, what is it, knock on wood, we haven't had that. But by definition, Alexandra's telling me right now that is 3 or more that are connected at any one school. So 3 or more cases that are connected at one school. So not isolation, but actual 3 positive cases that would be at any one school or any one location, because it wouldn't have to be a school.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And then my second question is completely unrelated to the first, but it is a question around, oh, where did the question go? Oh, it left. If anybody else has a question, I'll let them go first, and hopefully my question will come back to me.
Happens to the best of us. Trustee Singh, you're next, and then Trustee Ellens.
Dr. Elizalde, thank you for a very informative presentation. I really appreciate that. So I had a couple, I was really intrigued by the list of campuses, and you had the percentage of students who are showing up in person. So it seems like it's there's not really a pattern when you're looking at low income versus high income. So is that correct?
Yes, I chose those campuses because you and I had visited about what percentage of particular groups of students might be attending. I think there had been, and I don't know if sometimes I think I need to call myself a myth buster, because there was kind of this myth that students who are coming from more affluent areas were those individuals and only those individuals who were accessing on-campus instruction. Or there could have been the opposite thought, that it was only students who had maybe higher economic needs. And what we find is it's all over. We have some campuses in affluent communities that have very small percentages attending. Mm-hmm. We have some campuses in high affluent areas that have large percentages of attendance. And the same is true for areas that may be more challenged economically.
Okay. And you'll keep us apprised on if there are any shifts in those patterns?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I wanted to follow up on something that Trustee Ashley actually brought up, I think, at the board info session, which is about TAs for pre-K. Can you just tell us maybe where you are on that, if anywhere, if there's been any thought or progress on that?
Yes, I support wholeheartedly the idea of having teacher assistants in the classroom with our youngest learners. And we'll be examining that. We've put together the staffing committee that will be drawing up staffing for next school year. So we will have ample opportunity for me to bring that to you for discussion as to what number will generate, you know, what do we think, both from an effective matter of the TA in the classroom along with being efficient. So a balance, right? A cost-benefit analysis. But I absolutely agree that we need a teacher assistant in each of those pre-K classrooms.
Great, thank you. And then I've had a couple of parents ask me if it would be, so right now, I know a lot of us really appreciate getting that updated COVID dashboard every Tuesday. I had a few parents reach out to me and ask if it was possible to revise the communication letter sent home to parents when there has been a positive case on campus to reflect the actual numbers of cases that have been confirmed. Because basically it's hard to wait till Tuesday, you know, so they want to know, okay,
Was it one person that had COVID? Was it more than one? So we will begin, from our last conversation, we will begin, and as a matter of fact, if you check it right now, it has been updated. It will be updated every day now at 11 a.m.
Oh, okay.
So every day it will be updated.
Fantastic. Thank you.
So I think that will also help our community with regard to transparency and ongoing communication. So even though we were sending out notices for each of those, it wasn't reflected in the dashboard.
Okay.
And we will be updating it every single day at 11
Wow.
a.m.
Thank you.
By 11 a.m.
I appreciate that. And are there, okay, so last time we talked, you had made mention of a state program that might allow for some on-site testing for COVID. So was just following up on that to see if there was any.
Yeah. So I'm happy to report that we do not have to wait for the pilot testing that the commissioner and governor put in place at three districts. We are now at the front of the line for the rapid tests that are available. In fact, our health director, Alexandra Copeland, is putting a plan, finalizing a plan. We started that last week. We were the first district to respond after visiting with the commissioner, and he's offered this to the urban districts first because of the size and the number of campuses and students that we serve. And I am very excited that we may possibly have this on hand. You know, I'd rather under-promise and over-deliver. So I really think they're going to be here like really, really soon, but I'm going to say next week, but it could be even sooner than that. This would again be the rapid testing that is 97% accurate, and it's really helpful. They will be sending us a supply each month, and so we'll be able to utilize that. It's not quite as effective as, let's say, completely prophylactically students that don't have, or adults who don't have symptoms. It's primarily, they want us to use them with individuals who are showing some symptoms, and then you have to wait to see, right? But we won't have to wait because we'll be able to test. But I do want one caveat, just as a reminder, we can't make anyone test, okay? Now, I would hope that they would want to go ahead and test so we would know. The faster we know, the better contact tracing we do, and the better treatment, of course, that individual has. So that's one area. The other area is, again, Austin Public Health had been working with us and is already also getting us additional tests for schools that are Title I. That will allow us to also test at campuses that may have, you know, areas where the zip codes are showing maybe larger counts than the rest of than our community, and we'll be able to utilize that also to provide support.
Oh, fantastic. I'm so glad to hear that and appreciate Ms. Copeland and everyone else who's working on that. Fantastic. Okay, the other thing I wanted to mention was I'm very glad that we have limited the amount of testing, you know, that we're giving to our students. I have been hearing from some parents, particularly parents of children who have special needs, and they just wanted to know, like, do they have any recourse to exempt their child from taking some of these, like the MAP, I think it was the MAP growth beginning of year. Like if they have to take that online, it's kind of disastrous for some of our kids. And so I just want you to know if there are exceptions that the state is allowing us to make on things like that.
Yeah, they really, I don't want to say no because I'm going to make a note to go back and really check on that. We know, as I stated earlier, I don't anticipate, and nothing supports that the data there are going to be reflective of where our students are, because the test has also never been normed in a virtual delivery model. And so given that, we really are doing this more out of compliance. Now, I'm sure that an ARD meeting could deem that this particular assessment is inappropriate for a student. I'm sure that that's something we could do. So let me get with Ms. Casas and see what, and with Dr. Hickman, so we can see what options we have available.
Thank you. Let's see. Okay, and thank you so much for also reading us the fine print on the TEA guidelines about on campus and not on campus. I did have one clarifying question, if you don't mind. It was on page 7 of this document. And it was the second highlighted, it was really the last sentence of the highlighted section. So if students are on campus, but they are sort of in a pod model, like we have now, even after November 2nd, I interpret this as saying that students would be counted as RA present or RS present for funding purposes. Is that right? But does it say that we're just not allowed to do that?
Right. So what it's saying is, in theory, or in practice, more than in theory, you could say that you're providing students an opportunity for on-campus instruction that has to be defined as on-campus instruction. If you had students whose parents said, I'm going to send them to school, but I'm okay with them not getting on-campus instruction, they can stay in a pod and receive all their instruction over a computer or device, then we would simply have to not count them as on campus. We have to count, right now, we take membership and attendance for students that are at home that are being provided instruction remotely. So we would be able to do the same, except it's in our building. So if we had parents who said they were okay with that, then yes, we would be able to do that. But you still have to have some percent, even if parents did that, you still have to say that you have offered parents true on-campus instruction. So let's take a school. Every parent would have to say, I want to send my student to school, but I don't want them to have an on-campus instruction in order for me to utilize this.
Okay.
Does that
Thank
make
you. Yes. Thank you. I hope everyone heard that. So I appreciate it. That's it for me.
Well, I love the way you ended that, Trustee Singh, because what I was going to ask is there any way, and this is sort of overall administration, to make these open for learning segments that we've been having in our board meetings kind of a separate access item for parents to look at? I think it's hard for them to go find the meeting and then find the section within the meeting. But these times of conversation with you are what give me confidence. And if people aren't able to access them as easily as we get to hear them, it's not as great. But if we could take these little segments and make them accessible, I'm wondering if that's possible.
It is possible, and, I want to say that, we read your mind. But, so today, my Chief of Staff, Tony Cordova, said, what if we take the presentation and hook up or either the link to the minute of where we're doing this and put that on the website so everybody can have access to it without having to go hunt and peck for it. So it is our plan that when I do these presentations, that portion, even though again, yes, they could go to the art, to the meetings and then they'd have to look for it. We will put it separately and they'd be able to access it, and then they could generate some questions, and then we might even be able to have a place where their questions could be submitted, and we can continually have like a frequently asked questions that are coming from them as they view the presentation.
I love that. Thank you for thinking that way. And that does, you talked about that you're a myth buster. 80% of the emails I get are based on misinformation. And I don't know the right approach besides something like that, to really just allow parents and teachers and principals access to you. So I do think that will help, but I did want to kind of go back a little bit into what you were talking about on the training piece. So right now we are asking principals and teachers to shift what they had planned all summer and what they've been doing so far. And some are doing it quicker, some are having parents want it faster, what is the process for the district? Are people getting in trouble? Are people getting, to be able to use best practice sharing? I mean, what are you doing?
So, our job from central office is to ensure that the campuses are successful. It is not to catch people doing something wrong, but rather to provide support. So you are absolutely correct. We have some communities that email us saying, thank you, it's going great. And then I get some, as you do, emails that say, this is a disaster. And that really is a reflection of my lack of being able to provide the support that our campuses need at this time. And so we recognize that, and we're going to create a deliberate deployment of support so that our principal supervisors will go and sit with schools that we think are having more challenges with regard to how to either, as Trustee Tyke mentioned, or as you're mentioning, that we'll need to go and provide additional support for them. Some principals and their teams are great problem solvers, and they just come together and they are able to, let's do this and let's do that, and they do that in a great way. Other campuses, they could have challenges that sometimes our parents don't know. If 14 teachers are on an accommodation and are not physically reporting to school, that creates a lot of challenges for the campus. So they may not be able to move as quickly as others. So again, I think it's incumbent upon us. I don't think this is anything that campuses or principals or teachers have done wrong. If anything, I think it's on me and our team, and we need to get out to provide that support at a faster rate. And that is our plan, and that's what we're working on currently. So I would encourage our parents to communicate directly with their principals about what they are feeling positive about and what they have concerns about. And then I would encourage our principals and principal supervisors to ensure that we're communicating so that we can provide them guidance in ensuring that we do the best we can with whatever the circumstances are. Because you are right, it is going to, as much as people would say, why can't it be the same way across every campus? It can't, because we're dealing with very different circumstances. We have some schools that there's only one teacher out on there was one school I went to, no one was on an accommodation, and it was a large school. So much of it is just contextualized, but we need to provide those schools additional support. And I know Dr. Mays, Gilbert Hicks, Sheila Henry, Ty Davidson, they're all working together with the principal supervisors for us to get a better pulse of where we need to go first.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And just to, one more time, clarify what you answered to Trustee Singh, the face-to-face on campus is what starts November 2nd for anyone who requests it.
That's correct.
And if a student is on campus receiving virtual instruction, if the parent is okay with that, we can count that. If the parent is not okay with that, that's where the decision is made? It's parent choice?
It is parent choice.
Okay.
From that regard, it is, because the remote instruction, whether it's remote asynchronous or remote synchronous, which is what is meant by those initials on page 7 in case someone, RA and RS, it simply means, did we have an asynchronous plan for remote instruction, or did we have a synchronous plan for remote instruction? We submitted an asynchronous plan. So what that means is that parent can say, I'm good with Stephanie being on a virtual setting for the majority of the day. Now, I do want to just give a different caveat, though, that in some instances, I don't want parents to think there would be no device use in the classroom, because that, in fact, we want our teachers to continue to use devices, but in a blended model and still with the teacher of that classroom or that grade level or that content. So there could be some device use, but it wouldn't be for the purposes of the majority of the day, this is what's happening, and there's no interaction with that individual teacher. Does that help?
That does help. So thank you.
Trustee Ashe?
Well, I remembered my question because somebody else asked it, which was wonderful. And so I appreciate that answer, but then the conversation you just had, Trustee Ellens, made me think of another question. Because I actually do have some campuses that have larger numbers of teachers with accommodations. And so I guess my question is, for those students that choose to return to on-campus instruction, but their teacher is not on campus, are we still allowed to count those classes as on-campus instruction? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And only if the student is getting additional support from a teacher that is providing that grade level content. So if the entire time is with the teacher and there's no other, even though that's their teacher of record, then they've essentially been in the same setting they were in at home. So we have to, and here's where the challenges come in, what other teacher can work with those students that are physically coming in to provide asynchronous time or work that is not only just over the device. And so you can see then, just with your question, the different levels of complexity based on who's there and who's not there. Now, I did see what I now think is a good practice. There were a couple of our middle school principals, and it was led by, I think I saw one principal from a middle school, who communicated with the parents so they would know these teachers are not physically on campus. Well, that allowed some parents to go, well, if that teacher's not gonna be there, then maybe I'll just keep my child at home continuing to do what they're doing now. I thought that was a really brilliant way of doing that. So that's one of those things that's like, hey, this could be a good practice. Let's all principals kind of do this practice. And that way we can, so some parents were very easily able to say, oh, got it. It makes sense. So you know what? I'll just keep my child at home, which does help us in terms of now not having to find someone to physically watch and supervise, and then in addition to that, provide some additional instruction.
And I'm assuming you're talking about more of an elementary age where they only have one teacher all day, or are you also applying that to secondary where maybe they have 7 of their teachers that are present, but one teacher that is not?
Yeah, as long as the majority of the time the student is spent has a teacher, with them. So yes, I mean, the challenge is, let's say that I've got 8 classes, 4 on 8 classes a day. Let's say I have an 8-period day as a student. And let's say only 6 of my teachers are physically reporting and 2 of my teachers are not. I think, it's still gonna be a challenge for those 2 other class periods, but all of that would still be able to allow us to count that as on-campus instruction because they have received part of the day instruction from a teacher in their grade level and course.
Got it. So they can have maybe a proctor for one course.
For one.
If
one or 2,
teacher is out.
Absolutely.
Okay, because I know that was a question I was receiving. So thank you for all of the information that you have given us. It has been very, very helpful. Thanks.
Trustees, any other questions? If not, I just want to reiterate one thing for anyone who may have tuned in late. As Dr. Elizalde mentioned earlier, we had a number of teachers and parents concerned about the potential of accommodations being revoked next week if we receive more students face-to-face than we had anticipated. And Dr. Elizalde has confirmed that when those accommodations were granted, they were granted through December 31st of 2020. That's not to say that teachers who wish to continue their accommodations won't need to reapply. They will receive information as to how to do that and what the process is for that in November. But no one is in danger of losing an accommodation that has already been approved. So I want to make sure that we say that over and over again so that all of our employees are reassured that if you have already been granted an accommodation, it will not be revoked prior to December 31st, 2020.
And may I say one more thing that I meant to? I saw the piece on KVUE, I think it was this morning, maybe last night, that talked about unlimited capacity at Austin ISD, and that's what I wanted to reference. I wanted us to recognize, if you recall, I said right now, we were open to 50%. We're not at 50% district-wide. So saying we're at 100% when we haven't hit the 50% is highly unlikely. And again, I even resurveyed our surrounding superintendents just today because we had a meeting with superintendents in the area. No one except Westlake High School at Eanes is above 40%. So I am not concerned. I do think we're going to get some more individuals, particularly at secondary school, because the model is changing, and I think that will draw some students in, absolutely. But I do not believe that there's any data that supports that we are going to be anywhere near 100%. And in fact, I think some of the practices our principals did, like sending out, here are the teachers that aren't here, I think we're going to continue to see many parents who do have the option of keeping their children at home, who are still getting a good quality instruction, do so. And I also want to remind us, we do exist, though, to serve our students in the best learning environment possible. And so we have students, and we heard from parents, even at our district advisory council meeting last week, there were some parents, right, that were part of our group that said, I have to send my middle schooler because he wasn't doing well at home, yet she kept the elementary child at home. So we know we need to be accessible and available to our families, but we want to continue to do it in as safe a way as possible. So thank you. I just wanted to, because the numbers, if you just think about it, it's not like we had a wait list of the 50%. So that is why I'm so confident that we're not going to have, now that doesn't mean one or two schools we're not going to have to work with, because some schools individually do have more students wanting to return, but we'll be able to manage all of those. So thank you for allowing me to say that one more piece.
Sure, thank you. We now move to public testimony for items on consent agenda and items for separate vote. In order to accommodate our video conference format, members of the public wishing to participate in the public testimony portion of our meeting called in a dedicated AISD phone line in advance of the meeting and audio recorded their remarks. We will now play those recordings, so please listen carefully.
Hello, my name is Emma Montes-Sumners, and I'm a parent at Sanchez Elementary. I'm commenting on item 14.1 on today's agenda. Allowing any one individual the sole authority to select and employ all contract and non-contract staff, with few exceptions, is essentially stripping the incoming board from having the power to do their job and speak for us. The current board has the responsibility to prevent this from happening, especially since it's clear that the balance of power brought by a locally elected school board is necessary until the new superintendent becomes familiar with the culture and values shared by the vast majority of people here in Austin. It isn't clear if this point in the superintendent's contract was the result of oversight or what many people would essentially view as a takeover, but we cannot take away the power of an incoming AISD board before they even take their rightful place in the seat you're sitting in right now. I urge you to do everything in your power to either nullify this point in the contract immediately or delay the vote to activate it until the new board members are in place.
Hello, my name is Kynan Murtaugh, commenting on item 14.1. This item was negotiated behind closed doors without the democratic public input expected from public servants in the public sector. It gives the superintendent sole authority in hiring and firing staff and principals. It also gives her sole authority, without our democratic representatives, over reorganizations, reassignments, and layoffs. Public accountability and oversight is our only bulwark against a historically racist and classist legal and educational system. I do not see how giving the people less of a voice in their schools serves our most marginalized communities. Additionally, this superintendent has lied and misled us multiple times. I know it is popular to remove our government from any sort of real democracy, but I would personally like Austin to be as far away from our fascistic national political regime as possible. Do not compromise on democracy. Build a better future for all of us. Thanks for listening.
My name is Margaret Borden, and I am calling regarding agenda item 14.3, TASB Update 115. I partner with Measure, an Austin nonprofit seeking to change policies disproportionately harming minorities. Using Region 13 data, Measure's Innocence Initiative policy brief, emailed to all trustees, outlines the stark difference in discipline rates between Black and white girls. Measure recommends that campus discipline data be broken down by gender for each race, that discretionary removal of children from the classroom be eliminated, that funding be diverted from school resource officers to additional mental health services, and that school dress code policies have no disciplinary actions related to hairstyle and texture. I challenge the board to consider adopting these recommendations onto this agenda topic and future topics related to student disciplinary action. Please make breaking the school-to-prison pipeline a key priority articulated in policies. Thank you.
Greetings. My name is Willie, and I partner with Measure, a nonprofit that uses data and education to mobilize communities to eliminate social disparities. I'm calling in regards to agenda item 14.3, the TASB update 115. Our organization has published a policy brief under the Innocence Initiative that highlights the disproportional disciplinary rates among Black female students in comparison to their white counterparts. I implored the board to read the statistics and policy recommendations, such as eliminate any discriminatory actions in school dress code policies related to hairstyle and texture. I challenge the board to consider adopting elements of the policy brief onto this agenda topic and for future topics related to the assignment of disciplinary action among students of color. Thank you for listening to my testimony.
Good evening, board. My name is Mimi Stiles. I am the president and the founder of Measure, a research organization that mobilizes underserved communities to address social issues within Austin. I just want to remind y'all that our organization has worked for over a year to produce a policy brief. This is in reference to agenda item 14.3 for today's agenda. Just want to remind the board again that we have sent several emails just providing this policy brief. It's called the Measure Innocence Initiative 2020 School and Local Policy Brief, where we're asking for four very specific school changes that will address the school-to-prison pipeline and the disproportionality and discipline as it relates to Black girls, but also to every student. I thank you for your time, and I look forward to a response via email, and have a wonderful evening.
Hi, my name is Albert Marino. I am calling to speak on item 14.1 on the consent agenda. I'm a proud teacher at Ann Richards School. I'm also a proud member of Education Austin. And I'm calling to express my opposition to 14.1. If I understand it correctly, it gives the superintendent the sole power to hire and fire, to restructure, and reorganization, layoffs, things like this. It feels to me like a very undemocratic move, especially since we're about to have a brand new board. Almost half of the board is going to be brand new. If this is the will of the people, fine, but I think that at the very least, this should wait until after the election and have that conversation again. Thank you for listening. I appreciate y'all's support. Board members, I know you're doing everything you can to keep our students and teachers safe. I don't think this is the right time to do this. I think this is dangerous.
Claire Reuter. I am concerned and confused about item 14.1 on the consent agenda, which was negotiated behind closed doors. This gives the superintendent sole authority in hiring and firing of staff and principals. It also gives her sole authority without the trustees over reorganizations, reassignments, and layoffs. I need to bring to light what you are doing here. You are giving away your authority a week before a new board is elected. Why? Whether you are going or staying, do you really think this is serving the public to hand over all the power to a superintendent who has lied to the district? Wouldn't you rather be on the right side of history that supports democracy and transparency? Do the right thing and do it now. I also need to express my disappointment that you have to know these consent items before you can even have your voice be heard. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Gloria Vera Bedoya. I am concerned Actually, I'm confused about item 14.1 on the consent agenda, since this was determined, I believe, behind closed doors. This gives the superintendent sole authority in hiring and firing of staff and principals. It also gives the superintendent sole authority without the trustees over reorganizations, reassignments, and layoffs. I am concerned for this because I believe that this process needs to be well thought out, spoken about, and maybe a decision, a consensus. Anyway, I'm calling because those are my concerns. I think that there needs to be input from multiple persons when making these type of decisions. Anyway, just wanted to call in and ask about this. I am hoping that we can get some clarification so that I can understand the thought process behind.
Good evening. My name is Candace Hunter. I'm calling regarding item 14.1. From the Texas Association of School Boards, I quote, "Within the framework of state and federal law and state Board of Education and Commissioner of Education rules, your school district has significant latitude in shaping the educational programs of your schools. The operation of the school district at the local level is also a shared activity. The role of the school board members and the role of the superintendent are different. Your school board governs the district, but it does so with the advice of the superintendent. The superintendent manages the district, but he or she must do so with the oversight and management of the board and within the framework of policies and priorities your board adopts. This is a message to the sitting trustees and to those soon to be elected. You cannot be absolved of the consequences later by abdicating your responsibility now. I'm asking that you maintain a balanced partnership and that you do so with the interest of all of the children of Austin ISD. Thank you."
Hi, my name is Marina Roberts. I'm a public school teacher in Austin ISD. This is my first year as an educator, and I'm calling with regard to item 14.1 on the consent agenda today. This is a change that was negotiated behind closed doors. I feel that the trustees are hardly being transparent about this change. This is handing over a tremendous amount of power literally a week before the results of a school board election are final. I think it's grossly inappropriate to make this change. This is unacceptable, and you absolutely cannot do this without more input from the community. I don't think this represents what school teachers want. I don't think this represents what principals want, and I don't think this represents what's in the best interest of our families. We want to give people more power over the choices that affect their lives, and by doing this, you are doing the opposite of that. So please rethink this very, very poor decision. Thank you so much, and have a good day. Goodbye.
My name is Ariel. I teach in Austin ISD, and I live and vote in District 4. I'm calling about agenda item 14, and I do not approve of giving the superintendent unilateral decision-making on hiring and firing. I believe that all of us should be given fair process from a jury or a group of our peers, and people removed from our situations should not be making the final decisions about our employment. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Andrew Gonzalez, and I'm a teacher in the ISD. I'm calling because I'm concerned and confused about item 14.1 on the consent agenda, which was largely negotiated behind closed doors. This gives the superintendent sole authority to hire and fire staff and principals, but it also gives her the authority without the trustees over reorganizations, reassignments, and layoffs. I need to understand what you're doing here, why it is you feel it's acceptable to give this authority, which will affect the new board elected next week. Why would you give these authorities over to the superintendent? It doesn't make sense to me. It seems anti-democratic and not transparent. I need you all to do the right thing here. It's not right.
Hello, my name is Larry. I'm concerned and confused about item 14-1 on the consent agenda, which was negotiated behind closed doors. This gives the superintendent sole authority in hiring and firing of staff and principals. It also gives her sole authority without the trustees over reorganizations, reassignments, and layoffs. I need to bring this to light. What are you doing? What are you doing here? You are giving away the authority a week before a new board is elected. Why? Whether you're going or staying, do you really think this is serving the public, the students, the teachers, the staff, to hand over all the power to superintendent? That's never happened before in this district. Who has lied to you guys? Wouldn't you rather be on the right side of history that supports democracy and transparency? Do the right thing here and do it now.
I'm calling to express concern over item 14.1 on the consent agenda. I do not think that the superintendent should get sole authority over reorganizations, reassignments, and layoffs, especially with, so many economic crises ahead of us. We should all be working on those together in as democratic as a way as possible. Please do not give over your authority to the new or to the superintendent over this important decision for workers' rights in the district. Thank you. Bye.
Hello, my name is Sarah Gore, and I am commenting on item 14.1. I'm concerned about it for several reasons. One, the lack of transparency. This was negotiated behind closed doors. Two, it seems to give the superintendent sole authority in hiring and firing of staff, including reorganizations, reassignments, and layoffs. I don't understand the reason for it, especially considering that the superintendent does not have broad support in the district. And three, doing this right before the new board is elected seems really hasty and seems like you're making decisions for your successors without either input from them or public input. Thanks.
Hi, this is Ken Zarefis, President of Education Austin. I'm calling on agenda item 14.1. Education Austin would like to encourage the board to postpone the policy changes vote to the incoming board, as they are the ones who will be working with Dr. Elizalde for the foreseeable future. Opportunities for policies pertaining to major decision items around programs, terminations, and a RIF are drastic and will not fall on this current board. Therefore, any policy changes or adjustments should be held off until the new board is seated. At the very least, we see these as a way of limiting the amount of input that we as a community value. We in the city of Austin value process and accountability of our officials. Process is a time-honored tradition in Austin and is part of our culture. Dallas and other cities may avoid our level of process, but it is one of the things that makes Austin, Austin. We are, once again, encouraging this board to not make a decision on this, and if it was built into a contract before a policy could be changed, perhaps the cart got a little ahead of the horse right here. Please put any policy changes pertaining to 14.1 to the next incoming board.
This is John McCurdy Gonzalez, resident of District 2, taxpayer candidate. I am writing about item 14.1. I am deeply concerned with the change in language from the superintendent shall recommend to the superintendent shall determine. If the superintendent shall determine, what role is there for the Board of Trustees? And if there is no role for the Board of Trustees, what role is there for the voters of Austin? And if there is no role for the voters of Austin, what then is the difference between an Austin Independent School District and a charter school system that hands over all authority to the chief executive officer? Dear Board of Trustees, please save your role and the role of future trustees now and in the future to manage this. Austin ISD is a public entity and should be treated as such, and that contract language should be subject to severe review by employment lawyers, especially those who deal with public institutions. Thank you so much. Keep democracy alive. Don't be the McConnells of this moment.
Hi, my name is Kristen McPike. I'm calling to give public testimony to agenda item 14.1 on the consent agenda. I'm encouraging the board members to not give away authority to the superintendent while a current election for school board positions is already underway. The decision about giving away authority for things such as reorganizations, reassignment, reductions in force should be made by our newly elected officials. Thank you.
My name is Sophia Martinez, and I'm calling about item 14.1. I'm concerned about giving any one person authority over such a large school district, and I encourage you not to vote away your power at the end of your term. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rui Martinez. I'm talking about item 14.1 on the consent agenda. I am extremely concerned about this. This measure, essentially, what it would do is it would give the superintendent the sole authority in being able to hire and fire staff and principals without any trustee or elected position on any layoffs, reassignments, or reorganization. You know, what we need in the schools is more democracy from students and teachers and parents, not necessarily the people who are at the superintendent, which is an appointed position. You know, I understand the need for leadership, but what this is doing is this would allow for anyone who disagrees with a policy decision to be fired on site without any reason, recourse. It's a wrong position to take. It's undemocratic, and I'm extremely concerned. Thank you.
Hi, I'm calling about item 14.1 on the consent agenda. And I'm concerned and really confused why this was negotiated behind closed doors. It gives the superintendent sole authority in hiring, firing of staff and principals. It also gives them sole authority without the trustees over reorganizations, reassignments, layoffs. I need to bring to light that what you're doing here, you're basically giving away your authority a week before a new board is elected. And why is that? Whether you're going or staying, do you really think this is serving the public to hand over the power to a superintendent and without knowing whether they're going to act in good faith or not? And it's meant to be a whole board that decides on these kinds of things, not one single person. Wouldn't you rather be on the right side of history that supports democracy and transparency? I think you should do the right thing and do it now. Thank you.
I'm concerned about item 14.1 on the consent agenda, which was negotiated behind closed doors. This item gives the superintendent sole authority in hiring and firing of staff and principals. It also gives the superintendent sole authority without the trustees over reorganizations, reassignments, and layoffs. I need to bring to light what you are doing here. You are giving away your authority a week before a new board is elected. Why? Whether you are going or staying, do you really think this is serving the public to hand over all the power to a superintendent who has lied to the district? Wouldn't you rather be on the right side of history that supports democracy and transparency? Do the right thing.
My name is Trudy Richards, and I'm calling in reference to agenda item 14.1, policies to align to superintendent contract. I wholeheartedly disagree with the proposed changes to district policies. These changes minimize the authority of the board, a group of elected officials, a week before an election where 4 seats are in play, no less, and maximize the authority of one district employee, namely the superintendent. The proposed changes would make the employment practices of the district less transparent and would negatively impact the district's ability to attract and retain quality employees and teachers. In these tumultuous times where faculty and staff are already feeling unheard and frustrated, removing board oversight of employment decisions is not a positive step. Please support the rights of our educators and other district employees and vote no on the proposed changes.
Hi, my name is Frank Netcher, and I am one of the constituents. I am concerned about item number 14.1 on the consent agenda. This is giving the superintendent sole authority in hiring and firing of staff and principals. This seems like a bad idea to give away from the board the week before an election. It seems like there is not really much public good, democracy, or transparency involved in this decision. And especially because the superintendent has lied to the district over and over again, and this particular item was negotiated behind closed doors away from the public. So what I'm asking you to do is not vote to pass this. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I hope you have a great day. Bye.
Hi, my name is Charles Shorter.
I'm calling about tonight's agenda item 14.1, and specifically to express my vote against the superintendent being given sole responsibility for employment decisions at the principal level and staff layoffs. Thank you.
My name is Elias Palmer. I'm calling about item 14.1 on the consent agenda for tonight's meeting. It's Monday, October 26th. I have two students in Austin Independent School Districts, both in the McCallum vertical team, one at Lamar, one at Brentwood. Trustee Ashley is my representative. I'm concerned about this item on the consent agenda. If I'm reading it correctly, it gives the superintendent, who is an unelected position appointed by y'all, sole authority in hiring and firing of staffs and principals and over reorganizations, reassignments, and layoffs, which I think may mean it includes possible school closures or other changes without any board authority. I want you guys to be clear about what's going on here. You are giving away board authority a week before a new board is elected. I'm confused and concerned about this, and I urge you to take it off the consent agenda, debate this item, and reject it. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Amanda, and I'm a parent of a student at Martin Middle School responding to agenda item 14.1, policies to align the superintendent contract. Voting for this item undermines the power of the board members, of you, the trustees. It takes away your legitimacy. It undermines, by extension, AISD students and the parents that voted y'all into this position. Signing away this authority isn't just a formality like I've heard claimed by board members. The board doesn't merely ratify the superintendent's decisions. Bringing up important staffing changes to the board might be a quick conversation, but it might not be. My understanding is that these terminations don't have to be brought up to the board anymore if this agenda item passes. By relinquishing your power to the superintendent with this vote today, you are not giving space for an opportunity for important conversations. What if the superintendent just wanted to fire our health director in the middle of a pandemic? Wouldn't that be something that you'd like a voice on before it happened? You should change the policy to clarify who holds the power in the decisions. You, the trustees. Do not change the policy to give the superintendent more power. Change it to give yourselves more.
My name is Diana Haggerty, and I am a member of the Equity in Childcare and Education Collective and a mother of 3 in AISD. 14.1, like so many things with AISD in the last several months, is sneaking up under the radar with little to no information, no clarity, and the potential for some serious consequences. It sure reads like this gives the superintendent unilateral control when it comes to hiring, firing, programs reduction, salary reduction, and more. So we understood some unilateral decision-making for quick action in the height of the crisis and could even see why you made the decision, though barely, back in August. But now, just days ahead of an election, so from over here, it seems like a way to reduce public comment and reduce the power of a board that could include 4 new members very soon. I wonder why this has to happen now, and so do a lot of us. So please push this back. Disregard it altogether. There's a board for a reason. And on 14.2, do not limit the number of participants who can provide public comment. If there's an issue that the public cares about enough to speak on, hear everyone. Thank you.
Good evening. This is Jared D. Brackenridge, and I am calling on items 14.2. Although I do have concerns about item 14.1, I want to spend most of my time on 14.2. I am a little concerned because, as it appears, public citizens will not be able to comment on items the day of regular board meetings. So general public comment now goes to board information meetings. And I think that kind of is a disservice to the community. We still have 60 seconds to speak, and that is not fair at all. I'm a little concerned about this whole policy, being that it hasn't been updated since 2016, but we've been going under this policy as if it has been approved and updated. So I'd just like to hear more information about this specific issue, this topic, public comment. We need to let our families, our students, our staff's voices be heard, and 60 seconds is not enough time.
Hello, my name is Jenny Wells, and I live in District 4 and vote in District 4. I have 2 children in AISD, one in elementary school and one in high school. I'm concerned about action item 14 on the consent agenda, which was negotiated behind closed doors. It gives the superintendent sole authority in hiring and firing of staff and principals without the trustees. I need to bring to light what you're doing here. You're giving away your authority a week before a new board is elected. That does not seem right. Think about what you're doing, do the right thing, and please do it now.
Hello, my name is Trish Nicewander, and I'm calling because I'm concerned, deeply concerned, about item 14.1 on the consent agenda, which was negotiated behind closed doors. This item gives the superintendent sole authority in hiring and firing of staff and principals. It also gives her sole authority without the trustees over reorganizations, reassignments, layoffs. I need to bring to light what you are doing here. You are giving away your authority a week before a new school board is elected, and we can't tell why. Whether you're staying or going, do you really think this is serving the public, handing over power to a superintendent who has lied to the district? Why don't you be on the right side of history and that supports transparency and democracy? Do the right thing and do it now.
Hi, I'm calling in regards to agenda item 14.1 for tonight's meeting. It's my understanding that it's to approve the superintendent's contract changes. I've just been made aware of these changes and have not been able to understand how they are creating a huge imbalance of power, putting all the power in her court. This is not the way the Austin ISD community has operated in the past. We feel that the public and other members of the district should have opportunities to weigh in on some of the decisions that that this contract is wanting to change, to give her the ultimate authority on approving changes to staffing, employment, without getting approval of other entities, including getting rid of the way new positions and vacant positions are filled. And I think this needs to be brought forward to the public.
Hi, my name is Megan, and I'm a parent of a first grader and fifth grader in Austin ISD. My family has thus far made the decision to keep our children home to learn remotely to minimize the numbers of bodies on campuses and support recommendations from the CDC and other government agencies for social distancing. Consent agenda item 9.2 talks about a waiver that we are hopefully applying for that would allow for flexible school days at 2 of our campuses. And I'm wondering if there may be opportunities here to extend the waiver and seek flexibility district-wide. I will have to send my children back to campus as of November 2nd due to the mandate of 100% capacity for on-site learning and work. My work does not require me to be on any specific site, but I was told this move is in solidarity and we must all return together. If we send all staff to our sites in solidarity, to me that sounds like sending our teachers into a burning building and then sending everyone else in as a way to show fairness or solidarity. It reminds me of the equity versus equality image with the fence and the stools. We all get the same size stool versus getting the size that helps us see over the fence. I think real solidarity is doing the best work I can to support the maximum number of teachers as possible as they do the best they can in this unsustainable concurrent teaching model. I can show real solidarity by standing with teachers as we ask questions about how these 100% capacity plans.
That's the last message.
Thank you. At this time, the board will convene into executive session briefly. Trustees will still have the opportunity to ask questions or ask for clarification when we reach these agenda items. As a reminder, please feel free to share any comments or questions with the board by email at trustees@austinisd.org. We will now recess the open meeting at 7:40 p.m. and move to executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code sections 551.074, 551.072, 551.073, 551.087, 551.076, 551.129, and 551.071. For purposes of this video meeting, the board will now leave this open meeting, which will remain live online, and convene privately in a separate video meeting. When we are finished with our executive session, we will reconvene here. Thank you very much for your patience.
Good evening and welcome back. We will now reconvene the open meeting at 8:49 p.m. and we will now move to the consent agenda. Are there any consent items that trustees would like to pull for a separate vote? Trustee Tice?
I would like to pull item 14.1, please.
Item 14.3.
I need a second for trustee Tice.
Second.
You second? Trustee Singh. Okay. And then trustee Singh, you're pulling item 14.3?
Yes.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Tish Anderson. Trustees, any other items to pull? Okay, Secretary Ellens, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Give me 1 second.
Sure.
So I move approval, or I make a motion to approve consent agenda items 9.1 through 13.2 and item 14.2. Second.
Trustee Wagner?
Yep.
Okay, we have a motion. Yeah. Trustees, is there any discussion on any of these consent agenda items for the motion to approve consent agenda items 9.1 through 13.2 and 14.2? Trustee Singh?
I just wanted to do a shout out for some of the really innovative things that we're about to approve here. One of them is an approval of a contract for a pre-apprenticeship partnership dual credit program. And it's going to be, looks like it's an electrician apprenticeship program, which I think is awesome. And I think there's also building construction and a few other things, which just opens up so many opportunities for our students. I'm just so proud of that work. So thank you to the folks that are involved in that. And I think there was also another interlocal agreement with the ACC, and I think I saw a nursing program here as well. And so to me, this is just another example of just the innovative work that our district does. It just shows that we are the best place to come to educate kids in our district, because we are responsive to our local workforce needs and have some amazing partners to help bring these opportunities to our students. So just wanted to give a big shout out for that.
Thank you, trustees. Any other comments? Discussion on the consent items? If not, having a motion by Secretary Ellens and a second by Trustee Wagner to approve consent agenda items 9.1 through 13.2 and 14.2. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. And the motion passes by all those on the dais. We will now move to to those items pulled from the agenda. The first item is agenda item number 14.1. Trustee Ellens, do we have a motion for that?
I move approval of item 14.1.
Is there a second?
Second.
Trustees, any questions or comments on agenda item 14.1? I know that was one of the items that was under public testimony, so right now is a good opportunity for either board clarification, questions, or comments. Trustee Tice?
I would like to request the board's attorney, Christine Badillo, to come forward, or she can stay at her seat, and explain what our authority is, what it has been, and how it essentially does not change through the changes that are being proposed. Ms. Badillo?
Good evening, Board of Trustees, Dr. Elizalde. I'm Christine Badillo. I'm the board's legal counsel, and yes, I would be happy to go through some of these changes. As Trustee Teich mentioned, I think some of these policies are somewhat complicated, and it's kind of hard to understand what they do and how they work. So it's a really good idea, I think, for the board to go through it a little bit so that people can understand. The first to begin with is DC, which addresses the superintendent's hiring authority. And that is probably the easiest, the most straightforward. She has broader hiring authority. This policy is being amended to give her broader hiring authority, accounting for the fact that she's responsible for educational progress on all of your campuses. She needs to be able to make those calls. And you'll just please stop me at any time if you have questions or you want me to elaborate on anything. I'm going to move to DCE local now. And this addresses non-Chapter 21 contracts. Those are basically not your teachers. A lot of times these are administrators who don't hold educator certification through TEA. And this is true, and it's true for all of these policies. None of these policy changes authorizes the superintendent to fire anyone in a different way than is currently the case. Almost without exception, that is a function of law. So the board couldn't, by policy, change that. No one's due process rights are changing as a result of these policy changes. So that is the case in DCE. We're talking about non-Chapter 21 employees. It's true with them as well. Nothing is changing with regard to how those employees might lose their jobs or might be affected by larger programmatic things like a reduction in force. Yes, Trustee Anderson.
So back to the first one where you mentioned the broad hiring authority. Mm-hmm. In that instance, does it mean as you're looking at the policy that we have given any of our authority away to have any whatever as it relates to that?
Right, so it is fully within the board's discretion to make this change. This is authority the superintendent already has by virtue of her contract. This is not, I don't think the board should perceive itself as abdicating any authority here. You are empowering your superintendent to make decisions that she needs to make for the success of the district. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
No? I'm seeing no.
Well, I was just going to suggest maybe that we clarify further that the board only employs 3 people: the superintendent, the board counsel, and the auditor. So we do not have the power to select a candidate, interview a candidate. We ratify contracts that are given to employees, but we don't get to choose who the superintendent hires, just like we don't choose who a principal hires.
Right.
So I just wanted to clarify that as well, that we only hire and fire 3 people. The rest of our governance role has to do with contracts.
That's right. That is a fair way to put it. And I think if you were to look at these changes sort of globally, it really is to differentiate between the board's governance role and what is properly within the purview of the superintendent or the administration. Yes, ma'am.
I appreciate that clarification very much. I did want to just ask about the last paragraph under campus principals. Mm-hmm. So previously, the board did vote on final principal candidates. And so I wanted to just see, that appears, I think, to be a difference from what we had before, correct?
This looks like additional verbiage, yes.
Oh, I'm looking at the first one,
We're in
DC
DC.
local. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. At the bottom of page 1, the very last paragraph, it says that the board delegates to the superintendent the final authority to hire a campus principal. And I just wanted to clarify that that means we will no longer, as a board, be voting to approve that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so that is one thing that is a little bit broader authority for
Yes,
the
it is.
superintendent. Okay, thank you. And I know that Dr. Elizalde gave a very nice explanation at the board info session about that, so thank you.
Any other questions on DC or DCE before I move on?
Trustees, any other questions? Trustee Wade?
I was wondering if you could expand a little bit more on the
expand a little bit more on the board's responsibility with approval of contracts?
Sure. So the way that typically works is the board delegates the superintendent authority to make hires and to approve contracts. And the board, in this case, the board will be basically informed of the most upper level decisions. But in terms of the board's authority to approve contracts, that's all you're doing. The superintendent's making recommendations. As Trustee Vice President Cindy Anderson pointed out, the board doesn't participate in interviews. You don't, screen applicant pools, things like that. In fact, that is expressly not the board's role. And to the extent that a board might get into that territory, we'd become concerned about exposing yourselves personally in the district to liability based on you acting outside of your capacity as board members. So it is important to maintain a proper governance role in the hiring process. So that's where, at most we're going to see the board approving contracts. You're going to have a group of contracts submitted for approval, and that's how it's been done, I think, to some degree previously. But at the end of the day, you're not vetting these candidates. That's not your role. So.
And so materially that doesn't change from
No.
our current.
It doesn't change. It's not, the board sitting and looking at a long list and going through DocuSign is not, it's not any additional oversight. It's just a little bureaucratic step, basically. So what this will do is it will make things a little bit more efficient, and I think it appropriately puts the responsibility in the hands of the person who's, as I mentioned before, accountable for all your campus performance. She's got to make those calls.
And is this consistent with the Texas Education Code?
It absolutely is. The board has the ability to delegate this authority as it chooses with regard to hiring. And we'll talk about the other side of the coin in terms of terminations and non-renewals in just a minute. Vice President Anderson, did you have a question?
Trustee Ashley had a question, and then Vice President Anderson.
Well, and not so much a question as it was just a reminder of the conversation that we did have during the board information session. And it actually does speak to the exhibit and regulation as it does pertain to the principal selection committee and how that is spelled out, and that is still in place, and another way for people to be informed and aware of principal selection, and that helps inform Dr. Elizalde as well. I just think I wanted to make sure people understood that process is still in place as well.
So would it be fair to say that the changes to the policy actually provide more transparency as to who is ultimately accountable for certain decision-making, and that the board's governance role is to manage the superintendent as to how well she meets the performance directives of the district, manages her employees, et cetera. So it does not change the board's ability to ensure that the district as a whole and the superintendent's role in those decisions, that there is accountability for that.
Right. I think that's absolutely correct. The board evaluates the superintendent, and the superintendent is responsible for making sure everybody at every other level is doing their job. And so to give her the authority in this way over hiring is just reflective of her responsibility for that stuff. Yes.
Thank you.
Trustees, any other questions? I know I didn't have a question, just a comment. I just wanted to thank the policy committee and all of our trustees. When we've had discussions about the board information executive, I think there have been really good discussions about the checks and balances between the role of the superintendent and the board. So I really appreciate the governance discussions that we've had and the balance between those. So these have been really good discussions. Trustee Wagner.
Well, could I ask a question too about the work of the policy committee? And I ask this because I think it's important for our viewers to understand the work of that committee, and that we don't approach policy from a standpoint of just trying to affect an immediate change. Many of the times we approach policy because we're trying to make sure that we're maintaining consistency and clarity within all of our different informing legal requirements, contractual requirements, regulations, and so a lot and complying with education code, all of those pieces and parts. And so there at times is a lot of housekeeping and aligning language to make sure that things are consistent. And I think that this came about very much from that standpoint. And so I want to make sure that we call that out, because I think that there's been a lot of comment that we heard during public comment about why are we doing this a week before the elections. This wasn't intended as some sort of abdication of power from an outgoing board. This instead was an attempt that, in a very systematic way, as we approach other policies within the district, to align and standardize and be consistent in our language and approach. And with the end result that we will have a much more clear and deliberative and policy that we can adhere to well and consistently. I don't know if Trustee Ashley had anything else to add as the policy chair.
No, I do not. I think you said that very, very well. This is a time when we have realized that, or I guess as part of policy, you realize that this policy touches many other policies, and this is the one that we needed to change and make appropriate and clear. And so that's what the policy committee has been working toward.
I really appreciate your comments, Trustee Wagner, and I just want to reiterate too that it's also about improving transparency. There are a number of things in our policy that have yet to match the actual practice of what the board is doing and has done for quite a number of years. And it's also providing that clarity that you mentioned around whose responsibility is what, whose role is what, because we all expect to be held accountable for the decisions and the work that we perform on behalf of this district. So it is also trying to make it very clear that, unlike some of the misconceptions that were mentioned in public testimony, we don't tell the superintendent who she can hire. We don't tell her who she should fire. That is not our job. That is her authority as the superintendent of this district. And so we're just trying to provide that additional clarity and explain to our entire constituency that our role in a governance role is to hold her accountable for those decisions, but it's not to tell her who to hire or who to fire. That is not our job. We don't have the same expertise that she does, the same experience. And so it's really also about providing greater transparency, which is, I believe, what so many of our community members have asked for. And we are trying to be very responsive to that. So thank you.
In that spirit, I think we have a few more policies that our board council, Ms. Badillo is going to walk us through.
Sure. So the next one is DK local, and there's just one little change to that one, and it really doesn't functionally change anything. It is language to make it more clear, but there is nothing about that language that wasn't true before. It just makes it more clear. And I think ties back the loose ends to the next two policies that we'll talk about, which are DFFA and DFFB. So nothing really has changed there other than just a little bit of added clarity. So DFFA and DFFB are reduction in force policies. DFFA is financial exigency reduction in force, and DFFB is program change reduction in force. And both of these, functionally, the way they're used is as a basis for a termination or a non-renewal. And so, to be very clear as to both of these, nothing has changed or will change about the board's authority with regard to terminations and non-renewals. If an employee who has a Chapter 21 contract is going to be terminated or is going to have their contract non-renewed, the administration has to, by law, come to the board and make a recommendation, and the board has to accept that in order for anything to move forward, either to propose a termination or to propose a non-renewal. And then from there, the employee has due process rights that they can avail themselves of or not, with hearings and such, and then the ultimate decision to terminate or to non-renew a contract based on a reduction in force, as with any other basis, still comes back to the board. So that will not change at all. The superintendent does not have the ability, based on these programs or based on these policy changes, to conduct mass layoffs that the board won't know about. It just isn't, that isn't going to happen. That's not what it does. But what it does do, and something that you as a board touched on just a minute ago, is really seek to align practice to policy. But with regard to first, a financial exigency reduction in force under DFFA, keep in mind the board still has to declare it. That's by law. Texas Education Code 44011 requires the board declare financial exigency. And a financial exigency isn't just whatever you want it to be. It is, you have to meet specific criteria set out by TEA. You have to file for it and get approval. And then the board has to take action. So that's not, again, something that can happen in the dark. That will be at a board meeting. That would require board action and vote. And so that is what would trigger a financial exigency reduction in force. But what the policy changes do is allow the superintendent to select program areas, which is appropriately within her purview because the superintendent and the administration are the ones who are in the best position to know what those are. So functionally, if she brought them to the board, you don't know better than she does what program areas should be affected by a reduction in force. You're going to be relying on her to tell you and her to provide you the data that you need to know whether this is the right decision or not. So for her to determine those employment areas, I think is just, A, it's consistent with how things I think have been done within the district, and B, it's in alignment with just administrative efficiency, I would say. Does anyone have questions specifically with regard to DFFA, which again is the financial exigency?
Trustee Singh.
So just to clarify what you just said, the statement, when a reduction in force is to be implemented, the superintendent shall determine the employment areas to be affected. And those employment areas may include grade levels and departments and everything. So are you saying that that's how it has been practiced in our district?
So I don't know that Austin ISD has had a financial exigency RIF in a number of years, but the way the policy was previously written, what should have happened was the board would vote on those employment areas.
Okay.
So functionally, a superintendent or an HR administrator would bring to the board a recommendation, and the board would vote to approve it, much like what we were talking about before with employment contracts.
Okay.
The board would vote to approve it.
Thank you.
So that is a difference.
Trustees, any other questions on this particular one? Okay, if not, Trustee Tice.
So, on page 4 of 5, there's some language that's redlined. And can you clarify why that would be? Why would we remove that language from this particular policy?
Sure.
Superintendent recommendation and board vote.
So, superintendent recommendation and board vote. So changing this language and all. I think the way that it reads is to allow for the possibility that a non-renewal hearing might be conducted instead of before the board by an independent hearing examiner, which is a lawyer appointed by TEA to act like a judge and to hear the case like a trial. So when we think of this process, this is what you may be accustomed to in mid-contract terminations already, to the extent that you've heard any of those. That's how that works. It's an increased level of process. So it's the highest level, in fact, of due process that employees have in public schools in Texas. And so the way that would work is the independent hearing examiner hears the case and prepares a record, makes recommendations, makes findings of fact, and presents that whole record back to the attorneys, and then they come before the board and make oral arguments before the board, and the board reviews the record, and the board would then make the final determination on a non-renewal, and it would work the same way for a termination. So I think what's happening here is in policy, it is allowing the superintendent to make the determination as to whether it should be a board hearing or whether you want to avail yourselves of the independent hearing examiner process, which functionally is the way it's going to work anyway, because the administrators are the ones who put these hearings on. They have to provide the evidence. They have to, try the case, if you will. And so the administration is making the call as to how those are going to be heard anyway. I mean, in a manner that's consistent with what the law requires. So this is just to kind of line that up.
And I'd like to point out also that we have not, in my time on the board, we have not specified hearing, the manner of the hearing, et cetera. That's not been a practice of the board. And it's really an administrative process and not a board process.
Right.
And so we are just clearing that up with removing this language and adding in the superintendent proposes, et cetera. Okay, thank you.
Trustee Singh.
Ms. Padilla, you had mentioned, I'm looking at the general grounds on DFFA, page 2. So I just wanted to reiterate what I heard you say, which was and what it says here, the board would still have to vote, the superintendent would make a recommendation, and the board would still have to vote to authorize a financial exigency and authorize a RIF that would result from that.
That's right.
Okay. So I think later when we get to motions and whatnot, I think that might be an area where we can probably have some clearer language, because I think that was something that that I was concerned about. And so I do very much appreciate the clarity on that one.
Certainly.
Thank you, trustees. Any other questions on that policy? Hearing none, you want to continue with that?
Sure. So the next policy, the last one, is DFFB, and that is also a reduction in force, but it is due to program change. So this is distinct from financial exigency in that it is much more common, and in this particular case, and with regard to a program change, the policy again will not allow the superintendent to fire somebody without the board knowing about it, or in a manner that's inconsistent with policy as it stands today. Again, nobody's losing their job in a different way. But what will happen is, rather than the superintendent going to the board, what theoretically is supposed to happen under this policy as it currently stands, is that the superintendent would come to the board and make a recommendation to have a program change reduction in force. And the board would vote on that. And then they would come back to the board and recommend employment areas. Now, as we've discussed, this district has undergone a lot of reorganization, and perhaps even some program changes, and people have lost jobs, and these steps haven't been followed necessarily. And that could be for a myriad of reasons, but changing the policy in this way is not intended to be less transparent. It's actually intended to be more transparent in terms of how things actually work functionally within the district. And so I believe that these changes, and you are within your rights locally to make these changes if you choose to, in terms of how a RIF will be implemented in terms of a program change. And as we discussed before, again, the superintendent is the one who is in the position to know which program areas might need to change, what changes need to be made, when, if ever, that those changes would result in the need for someone to lose their job. Now, most of the time in a district of this size, a program change doesn't necessarily mean people are going to lose jobs, but sometimes it does. And when it does, we want to make sure that what we are actually doing is reflected in policy and vice versa. And so making these changes to policy, I think, are going to, with regard to program change particularly, allow you to bring your policy and your practices into a better sense of alignment. So again, you'll see the way that this has been changed, the superintendent will not come to the board. There will not be a board vote on a program change reduction in force. The superintendent will inform the board of employment areas to be affected, but the board will not vote on them. So the board will be informed. The board is not going to be in the dark about something like this. And then again, there are similar changes, as Trustee Teich pointed out, with regard to the process and allowing for the possibility that an independent hearing examiner may be used. The independent hearing examiner process may be used. Yes, sorry.
So I just want to clarify, this also does not eliminate the board's responsibility to hold the superintendent accountable for the outcome of any program changes.
That's right. That's right.
So again, there's still no abdication of responsibility there.
Right.
Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that is fair. The board still evaluates the superintendent, and the board relies on the superintendent to communicate about what programs the district, where you might be overstaffed, what programs are working, what aren't working, and what your needs are. And so to the extent the board is relying on the superintendent to make those calls, the superintendent's accountable for those calls.
Thank you.
Thank you, trustees. Any other questions? Trustee Singh.
Ms. Video, just to clarify again, on the very first policy, DC local, I did have a question. I guess it's the second red paragraph where it says the superintendent shall not, the superintendent shall have the authority to terminate or non-renew all staff and any other administrators who are not covered by Chapter 21, Texas Education Code. Is that something that was already the case?
Yes,
We're just
that was
putting in
already the
policy?
case.
Okay.
And so
that's not a change in practice.
It's not a change in practice. It is consistent with the law. The superintendent, so to the extent we're talking about staff, administrators not covered by Chapter 21, that means people who are potentially employed at will. That means people who are on non-Chapter 21 contracts, as we discussed. It does not mean your teaching staff. It does not mean certified educators, people who are on Chapter 21 contracts.
Okay.
The board still retains the authority to make those decisions with regard to those people. And with regard to your at-will and your non-Chapter 21 contracts, as we've discussed in looking at some of these other policies, nothing's changed about the process that those employees are entitled to.
Okay. And in the case of a financial exigency type situation that would necessitate a reduction in force, that would still come to the board first.
That will come to the board
So
first.
even if that might result in some Chapter 21 people getting laid off, we at least would have to vote first that would happen. We wouldn't vote on which groups of people within
Right.
that. Okay, and then in the case of a program changes, if we had to do a RIF related to program changes not due to financial exigency, would the superintendent have the authority to lay off Chapter 21 employees in that situation?
No, the
Without
way
a-
that would
without
work is that the superintendent, if she were to determine the need for a program change reduction in force, there are a lot, if you look at the policy, there are a lot of steps that go into it aside from just firing people. Administrators look at a lot of different ways to make things work, with the goal always of trying not to lay people off. That's what you don't want to have to do. But if in fact that becomes necessary, what would happen is she would have to apply the criteria set forth in policy to those in the affected employment areas in determining contracts to bring to the board for recommended non-renewal.
Okay.
So that would be where the board's involvement is. I mean, keeping in mind, she'd be informing the board of the employment areas, as per these changes, but at the point at which people are going to lose jobs who have Chapter 21 contracts, the superintendent is coming to the board, or the HR is coming to the board with those recommendations, and the board would have to take action to propose non-renewal.
Okay.
In order for anything to happen.
Even if it's a program change, right?
Even in a
Okay.
program change rep.
Thank
Yep. No, it's a good question. Thank you.
So, Chrissy, are those all of the policies that we?
Those are all that are in 14.1. Yes.
Now, is there a amendment we're making on one of them that we needed to add to the motion? Well, there was one, Christine.
Do you
that
want me
had-
to
Yeah, the one that you,
suggest? Okay.
if you go to just that one, and then I don't know if there's another one, but I know that this particular one.
So if we're looking at DFFA, I can look at Okay. DFFA on page two under general grounds. So it's about like a third of the way down the page. And Trustee Singh was requesting some language to make clear, I think, that the board would, where it speaks to the board adopting a resolution to declare a financial exigency, also making clear that the board would declare the need for a RIF. And what I kind of discussed was that the likelihood is that those two actions would occur sort of simultaneously. So what we might do is say, in the first sentence, a reduction in force may take place when the superintendent recommends and the board adopts a resolution declaring a financial exigency and a need for a reduction in force. Would that work better? Okay. Do I need to say that again?
Trustee Ellen, you wanted clarification?
I'm just trying to figure out how that's different than the second sentence.
So the second sentence says a determination of financial exigency constitutes sufficient reason for non-renewal or sufficient cause for discharge. So that's really, so the first sentence speaks to what the board's going to do, and the second sentence speaks to that, the financial exigency as a grounds for personnel action.
Okay, so can you repeat what you
Yeah.
suggested?
So just tack on to the end of the first sentence under general grounds, where it says declaring a financial exigency and a need for a reduction in force.
So trustee Letitia Anderson and then trustee Cindy Anderson.
Can you explain what a program change is? What does that look like?
So what a program change is it's if, for example, you were to say, we're overstaffed. I'm just going to make stuff up when I say this, so just know that. So if we were to say, we've got entirely too many associate directors. We're way overstaffed in the administration. So we're going to look at our administrative staff and figure out where we can cut, or if we need to cut. Or another example might be to say, we have this grant-funded program and all the funding is going away. Now, in reality, sometimes those people have contract addendums and things might be a little bit different, but that's an example. If this whole program is going to go away, we might not be able to place that many staff in other jobs. And in that case, we would have to look at the employment areas affected by that program change. And now it may be the case, and it's very often the case in program change RIFs or in program changes, that the administration working with HR and whomever else will find areas for other people to plug into. You know, your employees are very often certified in a variety of areas, and they can fill other gaps within the district. So you don't always have to fire people as a result of a program change, but when it becomes necessary, that is basically what it is it's a grounds for a non-renewal it's a grounds for non-renewal is a program change. So if you just can't find a way to do it without laying somebody off, it is a legally recognized basis.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to point out that program change is defined in DFFB in policy. And that's sort of related to my comment. One of the other things we discussed, it would not be part of the DFFA local policy, but having an exhibit that defines financial exigency, potentially also reduction in force, and then includes the TEA guidelines for the criteria that a district must meet to provide both our staff and our community with additional information. So it's not something that would require a board vote, but I think there was a consensus about a request that an exhibit be attached to DFFA for that purpose.
DFFA or B? DFFA or B?
DFFA.
DFFA is for financial exigency.
Who's up? Trustee Singh.
So I guess under employment areas on DFFA, was there some changes that we were thinking about having there too?
Yes, I think if you look at DFFB, it has almost identical language in terms of the employment areas, only instead of saying that the superintendent shall determine, it says the superintendent shall inform the board of. So if the board is more comfortable with that verbiage, we could just take that from DFFB and plug it into DFFA as well.
And then, can you confirm that this is pretty much what's been happening in practice in the district?
Yeah, I mean, I think
I know we haven't had a financial
I can only speak to my
exigency, but-
history, and I think you guys have similar like head scratching moments about what may have taken place that the board simply wasn't aware of, and I think the goal of this policy change is really, as I said, to bring practice into alignment with policy and vice versa, and I think. The result of this may be that you have a greater level of awareness of what's going on.
Thank you. And I have a question for Dr. Elizalde on this. I guess with any reduction of force, whether it's because of financials or because of program changes, I appreciate that you will inform the board. Would it be possible, or would y'all feel comfortable if we said that we would be informed in a public meeting, like maybe as part of a board info session or as part of a board meeting, even if we weren't voting on it? At least it would help increase the transparency and allow us to make ask questions.
I am not uncomfortable with that. I just want to be careful with regard to personnel matters, and so I don't want to right now absolutely say it would be done that way, because I want to make sure that whatever information we would bring would be in alignment with keeping just confidentiality with regard to personnel. But anything that would be not subject to the confidentiality regarding personnel, absolutely be happy to bring it to a general public meeting.
I appreciate that. Is that something that maybe we could add then to the policy where the superintendent shall inform in a public meeting the employment areas to be affected as long as it did not violate personnel confidentiality?
We could. I'm reluctant to just say on the fly, let's do that, because I would want to think through what some unintended consequences of that might be. One of the challenges I'll say is just working in other districts that have the policy structure where employment areas are presented to the board for a vote is like hysteria, right? Because the employment areas, if you look at the actual policy, there's a lot of latitude with regard to how you define employment areas. So for example, one could be all secondary English teachers, right? And then nobody knows what that's going to mean, but you know for sure every secondary English teacher in this whole district is not okay, right? And ultimately you may not have to lay anybody off, or ultimately you may lay 2 people off. But in the meantime, you've got a whole lot of upset, concerned teachers that you've got to deal with. You've got to be prepared to take care of those people in the meantime. So it's hard to say, and I think this is what Dr. Elizalde is struggling with in terms of saying we're going to have a public meeting where we talk about the employment areas, because you just have to be very, very sensitive to what that's going to do to people. At that stage of the game, you don't actually know who's going to be affected. So it makes it very difficult to sit and have a conversation about, secondary English teachers, just knowing that this is a public meeting and people are listening, but they don't know what's going to happen. It's just really, really hard to do that in a way that's not really harmful to people. So I would be reluctant to use the word shall. I would be reluctant to require it in a public meeting, quite frankly. I think I can tell that the board wants to move, wants this to be transparent. And I think you do a good job of balancing balancing transparency and communication with your governance role and with being responsible and respectful of your staff. So I think at the point at which I think that kind of work is really, and part of the goal of this policy is to have that done administratively in a way that's informed and thoughtful and careful, and also, to some degree, confidential and respectful of employees, and not unnecessarily alarming staff. Because as we mentioned before, when you do, for example, a program change, and even a financial exigency, very, very often it doesn't shake out to that many people who actually have to be let go. Most people will find jobs elsewhere in the district. Some of it you handle through attrition. People leave, people retire. Not that many people end up having to be let go, but when you start talking about a program change or a reduction in force, everybody starts getting scared. So a big part of this is managing, just keeping people calm and handling it appropriately and respectfully in a way that's least disruptive.
I appreciate that. I'm wondering, and I can respect that, so I really do appreciate that. I'm just wondering if my colleagues or Dr. Elizalde have any ideas on kind of a middle ground that would not, because sometimes it also causes hysteria when things are spurring on people,
Right.
And the intent is not to, create hysteria. It's really more to be brought along. And I actually view it more as an opportunity to bring the community along in decisions that we're making and helping to understand and asking the questions that are going to come to us as trustees, whether we're part of it or not. And I think that's maybe if it's not done in a public, in the words I use, maybe y'all have another idea about how we could. I just don't want us to be in a situation where we're like laying off, a bunch of people, like a bunch of our librarians or, whatever, like some group of people without having a chance to discuss it publicly. That's part of the democratic process in my mind, So maybe there's a way we could do that that I can't really think of right now.
Trustee Ellen, do you want to do that?
So I was immediately just thinking, we do have some areas with very few people in them. So I was wondering if that also would be exposing individuals in a way that we're not intending to do. But so that's one reason I hesitate to put that requirement. But I like your suggestion, and I'm thinking, I would say, Dr. Elizalde, when we've mentioned things where we feel like we need to think through a process or a communication space, you've been very attentive and very responsive. And so maybe there's just what you're hearing tonight, I would like more people to talk about, is helping us find that process of what that communication might look like in a way that allows you to manage the system and the situation and us to remove barriers for that, but at the same time, be able to serve our constituents in the way that we need to do. So I'm wondering if there's a directive or something we could, I should say directive, but an expectation that we set in motion, maybe not tonight, but we remember as part of our work with the superintendent evaluation or something like that. So, I feel confident she's hearing us, and we'll look for an answer there versus putting it in policy.
Sorry, Trustee Ash.
So I am going to kind of actually bring us back to DC local and try to put it in maybe a context with the FFA local. And maybe the compromise is to be found there similar to what we found in DC local, and that we had an exhibit that just kind of spelled out some processes and spelled out some desires for ways that the board was wanting to be heard or wanting to be communicated with. And I think that that would be something that potentially we could discuss in the policy committee as part of what we would add to that policy as an exhibit, that we could work with Dr. Elzalde and her staff and the 4 policy committee members in order to find that and be able to present it. If that's amenable to other people and Dr. Elzalde and her staff. That would, because like I say, there was a lot of concerns in DC local, and I am looking at my fellow policy committee members where we were discussing communication about principal hirings, and that resulted in the exhibit that is a beautiful flow chart that talks about how everybody's going to be communicated with and really spells out some things that maybe weren't as transparent before. So if that is something that people are willing to, I'm gonna pretend like Edna Butts is actually sitting in the audience, even though she's not, and say, hey, Ms. Butts, if we could please put that on our agenda, I would really appreciate that.
Dr. Elizalde?
I would readily commit that we could do an exhibit that would outline the process, even of if this were to happen, what it would look like and what the steps would be. I think similar to like the principal selection process. I think that would be a great way that we could document that this would be the expectation. And you could certainly give me feedback on that exhibit as well.
Would we be voting on that exhibit then as well?
The policy committee doesn't traditionally vote on the exhibits. We vote on the local policy. And that doesn't mean that we can't bring the exhibit to a board information session, especially as we've had this conversation tonight. And we can discuss it and have it brought forward in a very public way.
Trustee Anderson?
So the question of the day is this of urgent need, and is this something that can be done after new trustees come on board?
Yeah, I think it can be done when new trustees come on board. What I would say with regard to DC is that it's what you're already doing. So with that one, I think you might as well go ahead and do it, because it's just to bring again, practice and policy into alignment. With the RIF policies, you certainly can wait. Again, I think, I will leave it to the board's discretion, and I would certainly defer to the administration in terms of, their wishes as to timing. So, yeah.
Well, my request is DC local for a vote, and the rest wait until new trustees come on board so they can have an opportunity to provide feedback.
Trustee Ellens.
So I'm just going to ask for some clarification. If we have runoffs, then are you asking that the vote not happen until January?
Whenever it's scheduled, I guess that's when it'll be. But that's just my request. If the thought is that this is somehow being rushed through because election is on the 3rd, then let's give the new people coming in an opportunity to provide feedback and vote on it.
Well, I'm guess I'm done, but I'm going to throw it back to Christine. A January vote, we have also a policy that at least tries, if not requires, I think it requires, that if we're going to have decisions be made that affects anything next year, those should be done by December. And if we were going to have any changes that need to happen for next year, the vote on this policy, not until January, ties the hands of the superintendent.
Yeah, so if you have a policy that says anything that's going to be effective for the next contract year has to be done by the next year, calendar year, has to be done by December, then yes. I mean, functionally, you wouldn't be able, you would be using your old policy for the coming contract year decisions.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, thank you.
Trustee Anderson and then trustee, Singh. Okay.
I was just gonna just voice that I like Trustee Letitia Anderson's idea to wait a bit if we can, mostly because I like Trustee Ashley's idea about the exhibit, but I would like the opportunity to vote on a complete policy for whichever one we're talking about, DFFA, I think, that has the exhibit included. That would be my preference, because I think that's going to help me, I don't know, personally, that's going to make a difference for me.
Trustee Cindy Anderson.
So I guess my concern about that is that when it comes to things like in DK, reorganizations, we are not really changing the practice of what the district does. And we've spent, how many hours now? 3 hours? Having these conversations. And I would suggest that regardless of when the new board is fully seated, there is always an opportunity to come back and revisit and change something. And I would suggest that being a member of the policy committee currently and seeing the agenda that we have, it is going to be difficult to have another 3-hour conversation when we have a lot of policies that the board really needs to work through to make sure that we are doing our best work for our students and our staff. And again, if the new board in January wants to revisit it, this does not prevent them from doing so, but I would just suggest that if that were the direction we were going to go, frankly, that conversation should have been had in the information session on the 12th, and we wouldn't have had to spend 3 hours on it tonight. Because there was other work that we could have done instead. And so I would prefer to take the vote. If the vote doesn't pass, then that sends us in a different direction.
So just to clarify to the board, there is a motion and there is a second, and we're in discussions about a motion right now. So I don't know if there are any other questions from the trustees, or Christine, if you've got any additional comments about the policies themselves.
No, I don't think I have anything else. I just would want to clarify, so the motion would be to approve subject to the revisions just noted in the discussion, I guess.
So subject to the revisions of BFFA under general grounds
And employment areas.
and employment areas.
Okay.
Yeah, that. I'm sorry.
Do we need a second for that?
It's been seconded. Actually, the motion was made by. The amendment. I'm sorry. Well, if it's acceptable to the person who made the motion, and thank you, Christine, sorry. If it's acceptable to the individual that made the motion, it can be added to the motion without a second.
I think that's not fair. I think we have to vote, because that is a discussion of the board. And we have two amendments to DFFA. I made the motion, but I don't feel like I can just tell the board that we're changing that. The policy committee worked on that a lot, and so I feel we need to vote on the amendments, just to give the public,
Sure, we can do that.
the press.
So,
But there are two amendments, both from Trustee Singh on DFA local. That was one declaring within the general grounds language changes and within the employment areas language changes. Does anybody need me to read those again? Do y'all know what they are?
Could you read the change in the employment areas, please?
Yeah, so correct me if so what I've got is that it would read, when a reduction in force is to be implemented, the superintendent shall inform the board of the employment areas to be affected. So that would be the change.
that's one.
Well, my full motion is actually the employment areas to be affected when a reduction is to be implemented, the superintendent shall inform the employment areas to be affected to trustees in a public meeting. That would be my motion. Oh, as long as it did not violate personnel confidentiality.
Okay, so I didn't write all that. So do you have that written?
No, but I think I can say it.
Can I make a request? And Christine, I don't know the best way to do this, but it seems like we need to split up the amendment by policy, because just speaking for myself, I would support one but not the other. And so if we're going to amend policy from the dais, I think those need to be voted on individually.
Okay, so
unfortunately, this agenda item has multiple policies.
All of them together. So the current motion that is on the floor is to approve as presented, and it has been seconded. And so now what we're talking about is Trustee Singh potentially wants to make a motion to amend only DFFA.
With a couple.
Is that right?
Well, let's see, if DFFB has a similar.
I think DFFB is you're probably going to want the exhibit for DFFB as well, would be my thought.
Yeah.
So.
But the need for an exhibit isn't an amendment, and you had a legal concern with including the language in the local, so.
You can make a motion to direct the policy committee to go back and create an exhibit in collaboration with the superintendent.
Right, but that's not what Arthy's asking for.
I know, that's what I'm saying, you can possibly do that. That's another option instead of doing this. But.
So I would say maybe for the sake of just clarity, I think Arthy could make a motion to amend and limit it specifically to DFFA and DFFB, and just include the language that you wish to,
Mm-hmm.
and we could address the notion of exhibits separately.
That's right.
So then, Arthy, I guess you would need to state for the record what your motion,
Sure.
the contents of your motion to amend.
Okay, and we are going to separate, as Trustee Cindy Anderson had mentioned, like the two different motions in DFFA, right? So I'm just talking about the one that's problematic, okay?
Right, but I guess I'm still not understanding. So, but the language you wanted to add about inform in public is part of your recommendation for DFFA.
It is, well, it's going to be in both of them, really, but.
See, that's where I guess theoretically, if the majority of the board also has concerns about unintended consequences or legal issues, including one of the three changes, then another motion or another amendment can be made for just the two.
Well, so I think probably the simplest way to do it would be, so she's amending the motion to approve as presented, the slate, to the extent that she wants to amend the language of DFFA and DFFB as follows. And then if trustees don't approve the amendment, then they don't approve the amendment.
Right.
Right, and so then the original motion is what we'd vote on unless there was another amendment.
So Trustee Singh would make a motion to amend the current motion with the language, if that's what you want to do.
Sure.
Go ahead.
So, do I need to say it again? Are you making me say it again?
Yes,
okay. So, I move that in DFFA local and DFFB local, we amend the language. Oh gosh. I lost it. Hold on a second.
Employment areas on page 2. Yeah.
Page 2. Thank you. So that we change the language to read, when a reduction in force is to be implemented, the superintendent shall inform the employment areas to be affected. Shall inform the board, thank you, the employment areas to be affected at a public meeting, as long as it does not violate personnel confidentiality.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion on that? So hearing no discussion, all those in favor of the motion to amend the motion to approve 14.1 with the policy changes that Trustee Singh outlined, all those in favor, please raise your hand. All those against? And all those abstaining. So the motion fails 2-4, oh, sorry, 2-4, 4 against, and 2 abstaining.
The amendment. The amendment, not the
The,
motion.
the amendment fails, sorry, the amendment fails 2-4, 4 against, and 2 abstaining. Trustee Anderson?
I was gonna say, can I make a motion for an amendment to just include the words, when a reduction in force is to be implemented, the superintendent shall inform the board. This is in DFFA to be consistent with DFFB.
Is there a second to that amendment to the motion?
Second.
I'm sorry. So having a motion by Trustee Cindy Anderson and a second by Trustee Krishnashi to make an amendment to the motion. So, as she stated, all those in favor, please raise your right hand.
Discussion?
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right, Trustee Singh. Discussion.
So I have a question. If I wanted to make a motion that accepted that, but also added if I wanted to make a motion to just hold off on voting for this until we had the exhibits listed out, would that just happen when we're voting on the whole motion? Or would it be like?
Yeah, so you couldn't amend the existing motion in that
Got
way.
it.
So yeah, you have to.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, because we're in the middle of it. So any other discussion? Okay, so all those in favor of Trustee Cindy Anderson's motion to amend our policies?
Please read that.
Sure.
Is to amend DFFA to include the language, when a reduction in force is to be implemented, the superintendent shall inform the board of the employment areas to be affected, which would replace shall determine.
Discussion, questions? So all those in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand. All those against? So the motion to amend passes 5-3. So Trustee Singh, was there another motion you had? There was a second motion.
It was in the general section of DFFA.
Under general grounds, is it that piece?
Yeah.
Thank you. I make a motion to add a phrase to the end of the sentence. A reduction in force may take place when the superintendent recommends and the board adopts a resolution declaring a financial exigency. And I can't remember what the rest of it was.
Need for a reduction.
Oh, yeah, and a need for a reduction in force. Thank
So
you.
is there a second?
Second.
Okay. So a motion by Trustee Singh, seconded by Trustee Tice. Any discussion, trustees? Yes, Trustee Tice.
Clarification, this will be for DFFA and DFFB, or just DFFA?
I think financial exigency is when only
Just
one of the
DFFA.
policies.
It's just DFFA.
Okay, DFFA, just want to make sure that that's clear. Okay.
So Trustee Singh, can you just repeat that motion one more time under policy BFFA, just so that we're all clear?
Happy to. A reduction, so change the first sentence to add at the end, and a need for a reduction in force.
Okay, so any other discussion, trustees? And if not, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand. All those against? All those abstaining? So the motion passes 7-0-1. So now, unless there's another motion to amend the original motion, so we have a, if not, we have a motion by trustee Ellens and a second by trustee Letitia Anderson to approve item 14.1 as amended with the two motions we just made. Actually, we amended with one because the other one failed. Yeah. So we passed 2 of the 3. Any discussion before we move to the motion? And if not, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. All those opposed? And all those abstaining?
Actually, I'm opposed.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
You're
Opposed.
abstaining? I'm sorry, against?
Opposed.
Opposed? And you're abstaining? So the motion passes 6-4, 1 against, and 1 abstaining. So we move to 14.3.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, trustee Ellens, do I have a motion for 14.3?
Yes, hold on. I move approval of the policy revisions proposed in TASB Update 115 with the exception of F&G local.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Did you second? Trustee Tex, okay, all right. So we have a motion by trustee Ellens and a second by trustee Teich to approve 14.3. I think trustee Singh, you had pulled 14.3. I don't know if we want to have any discussion on that item.
Yeah, I did. First of all, thank you to the policy committee. This is really fantastic to see so much more in here clarifying. Sexual harassment, Title IX, dating violence. I really appreciate that. So thank you. I wanted to, there is a reference in here about the legal definition of dating violence, I believe. Let me double check that. Yeah, the legal definition of dating violence, and I apologize, Ms. Badillo, for I forgot to mention this earlier to ask you, but can you tell me, or is there a reference to what that legal definition is? I see how we've defined it, but
I'm sorry, I just had to log back into Board Docs. Hold on.
So if you look at attachment 11, and it is page 2, and at the very top, the first sentence says, prohibited harassment includes dating violence as defined by law and this policy.
Okay, so then FFH, then we have to go to the legal policy. So let me pull that up really quickly. And the legals are not subject to adoption.
Sure. I was just curious to know what it was.
So bear with me for 1 second.
That's fine. And I think while you're looking that up, I just want to share with my colleagues why I was wondering about this is because, I just want to make sure we don't have language in here. Kids don't really date so much anymore. It's a different culture. I mean, some do, but it's just kind of a different culture from what I have seen and heard. And I just want to make sure that we're not excluding situations where you have 2 kids who might not be dating, but they're messing around, or whatever you want to call it. But like, I just want to make sure like there wasn't some sort of legal definition, because, you know, that would not protect kids in that situation who are still being harassed or being hurt in some way.
So just to clarify, Trustee Singh, you're looking for the citation or the source of the definition
Well,
for the dating?
I
for
want to
dating
understand better what the definition actually is, because, I mean,
I'm not finding a legal definition. Your FFH policy doesn't reference a legal definition of dating violence, but I'll check through your policies and see if I can find something more specific.
okay.
FFH local on page 4 of 10 provides a definition of dating violence.
Yeah,
That's
and
a local.
is that, yeah,
Page
and I
4
saw
of 10.
that. So is that our definition, or is that like a legal definition?
What's the source
The
of that?
definition provided by CASB.
Okay. So I think my small concern, and I love the policy, I'm going to vote for it, but I just wanted to clarify, like, you know, so if we're looking at that page, page 4 of attachment 11, dating violence is defined, and it says dating violence occurs when a person in a current or past dating relationship uses physical, sexual, verbal, or emotional abuse, et cetera, et cetera. So I just kind of, you know, what do we mean by dating? Because, like I said, there are a lot of times where this type of thing happens, but they're not necessarily dating or had dated. So I just want to make sure that that was still covered.
Yeah, I think globally speaking, anytime that a student is experiencing harassment, just unwanted behavior, either based on their gender, of a sexual nature, that is potentially going to implicate Title IX. And so your Title IX processes, so some of the policies that you're updating in this update are really key to that.
Okay.
So the notion of dating violence, I would say it's never going to work against somebody. I don't think
Okay.
anybody is ever going to find themselves saying, well, you weren't dating.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like define date.
Okay.
Right?
And that's great. Thank
Yeah.
you. No, that's good. And then the other question I had was, just real quick, and I've brought this up so many times, but would this policy cover a situation where a guy or a girl, where somebody is kind of blackmailing or coercing, I guess blackmailing or threatening to release photos of another person, another student, that person
Yeah,
would
it
not want out
would.
there?
And in addition to that, Chapter 37 also addresses that directly in terms of disciplinary consequence. The threat of releasing intimate visual material, it's a crime.
Okay.
And in addition to that, it is one of those specific offenses that the district is allowed to just like heightened penalties for it. So DAP or expulsion on that basis.
Okay, but
So-
that's not listed in here as an example?
No, that would probably be more likely in your discipline policies, because that's where we generally think of it.
Okay.
But
Thank
yeah,
you.
that's not uncommon, and that's something your administrators see and probably know very well how to deal with, I would think.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Trustee Ellens?
Yeah, I was wondering, we had a couple callers that talked about our discipline policies. And I just wanted to clarify that what we're approving tonight is what's come down to us through the legislative session, through a legal process. It's not just a free-for-all for all the things we want to talk about. I think Trustee Cindy Anderson and Ashley, you both talked about the vast list of items that you have to go forward with the policy committee, and I'm pretty certain there's some discipline, student code of conduct. And I did want the public to know that that is something we are reviewing. I do also want the public to know we already changed our student code of conduct around some of the things that were specifically talked about tonight regarding disciplining students of color for hair, clothes, those kinds of things. So I would, and I don't generally seek credit, but I want a little credit for that. Thank you.
Trustees, any other discussions on that item? So having a motion by trustee Ellens and a second by trustee Antis to approve item 14.3, all those in favor, do I need to wait for a trustee? Wait, so all those in favor, please raise your right hand. So the motion passes by all those on the dais. We will now move to items for a separate vote. Trustee Anderson, do you have a motion to approve item 15.1?
I move we approve agenda item 15.1.
Do we have a second?
Second.
So any discussion on item 15.1? So having a motion by trustee Cindy Anderson and a second by trustee Antis to approve item 15.1, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. All those against? And all those abstaining. So the motion passes 7-4, 0 against, and showing trustee Amber Ellens abstaining from the vote. So before we go to executive session, I just wanted to take a few minutes to raise one of the accolades that I did not have an opportunity to raise earlier in the meeting. AISD Educa held the first virtual talent show, Proud to be Hispanic, on October 15th as the closing of Hispanic Heritage Month, with 60 student submissions from across the district. And families celebrated culture with photos and videos that reached more than 14,000 Facebook followers on the AISD Educa Austin page. And the winners include dance Celine Lerma Sanchez, pre-K3 in Andrews Elementary School from District 1, Maisie Cubas, 4th grade in Menchaca Elementary School in District 6. Music was Christopher Portilla Tolentino, 3rd grade, Guerrero Thompson Elementary School in District 3. And in drawing, Emmanuel Ramirez, 8th grade at Lively Middle School in District 6. And in writing, Stephen Cortez, 8th grade from Gus Garcia Young Men's Leaders Academy in District 1. Now I'm excited to share one of the videos from Ms. Cubas, who attends Menchaca Elementary School in my district.
Hola, me llamo Messi y esta es la bandera del Perú. Hoy mi mamá y yo vamos a bailar marinera norteña. La marinera norteña nace en la ciudad de Trujillo. Es un baile en pareja que expresa elegancia y de enamorar a la bella pareja. Comencemos.
Thank you to Maisie Cubas, a 4th grader at Menchaca Elementary School, and happy Hispanic Heritage Month. We will now recess the open meeting at 10:12 p.m. and move to executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code sections 551.074, 551.072, 551.073, 551.087, 551.076, 551.129, and 551.071. For purposes of this video meeting, the board will now leave this open meeting which will remain live online and convene privately in a separate meeting. When we're finished with our executive session, we will reconvene here, and again, we thank you for your patience. Good evening. We will now reconvene the open meeting at 11:51 p.m. Secretary Ellens, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Having a motion by trustee Ellens and a second by trustee Letitia Anderson to adjourn, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. And the motion passes by all those on the dais. And the meeting is now adjourned at 11:52 p.m. Thank you.